Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to discuss this morning between now and 1 o'clock, including the stories about a UK Islamic summer camp risking radicalising children, ministers working on plans to introduce ID cards but just for immigrants, and crazy golf trips, circus tickets, countless Amazon parcels, how cash-strapped councils, and let's remember, so much of our council tax has gone up recently, they're handing out gift cards and fun days to asylum seekers using taxpayers' money. Yes, really. Also a huge report on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph today by John Mann and Penny Morden, two politicians who don't agree on much, but nonetheless they do agree that anti-Semitism is rife amongst the middle class. Racism against Jewish people normalised across the NHS, education and the arts. Why has that happened? We will find out. We'll talk to Sarah Pochin today, the Reform MP. We'll talk to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. We have our debate desk panellists, Phil Dave and James Bealby. We'll also have a debate on Ozempic, because there are so many people saying, hold on a second, these fat jabs, are they actually worth it? Or are they something that could be storing up health problems for the future? There's loads to discuss this morning, loads to debate. I want to make sure that you get your voice on the air, because this is my show, but it's your show too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can give me a ring, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. And the question we're asking today, because you want to talk about it, the announcement was on Thursday, but still the debate continues. How is Starmer going to solve the migrant crisis? What do you want him to do? Is this one in, one out policy actually going to work? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I can see the phones going already. Let me know your thoughts. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Lots to discuss, and we'll be discussing it with Sarah Pochin, the Reform MP, in just a second. Let's just hear what Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, has been telling Sky News this morning about Starmer's immigration plan, this one in, one out plan. Will it work? What does the Transport Secretary think?
We believe that we've got a robust, workable deal with President Macron. It's a deal that the previous government weren't able to negotiate. And I think this is ultimately the way in which we break the model of these international people smuggling gangs that are operating in multiple jurisdictions across Europe. We have to be making prosecutions. We're doing that not just in England and Wales, but in France and Germany. I get all of that. But there's a matter. That is why we have to be working with President Macron and our allies in Europe to tackle this problem. We're not going to be able to do it on our own.
Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, speaking to Sky News this morning. We did ask her for an interview. She said she didn't have time. Sarah Pochin does have time. She is the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Hellsby. Sarah, good morning.
Good morning, Peter. I've always got time for you, you know that.
You're very kind. This one in, one out plan is going to be a robust, workable deal. It's going to break the model. No doubt you're incredibly enthusiastic and think it's brilliant. Good old Keir Starmer. That's what you're about to say, Sarah.
You know me so well. So all week I've been saying, one in, one out. What are we doing teetering around the edges of this national emergency, which is what it should be declared as? You know, we're talking 800 in, none out. Let's be realistic about this. One in, one out. What difference is that going to make to the situation we're in? We are being absolutely destroyed as a country from a point of view of culture, from a point of view of our finances, by this national emergency that we are facing down on the south coast. The British people are not stupid. They're not fooled by this rhetoric. How can Heidi Alexander really sit in these interviews and say that we need this deal with Macron? Oh my goodness, Peter, it's quite frightening that they think that the British people are going to put up with this. Because I'm telling you, I don't think that we are going to put up with this for the next 4 years. I think that something's going to have to change, because the level of frustration out there on the doorstep around the country is getting more and more heightened now, and people just feel like they are not being listened to.
Especially when you see taxpayers footing the bill for boat migrants to go to the circus, play crazy golf, receiving thousands of pounds worth of Amazon parcels. This is a big investigation in the Mail on Sunday, unearthed by your party, Reform UK. Political row about new migrants, the return deal raging, of course. And what's happening is that various councils that Reform is now in control of, like Kent, for example, suggests local authorities struggling to cope with the burden of boat migrants landing on its shores. Your party's Reform audit shows Kent County Council spent £102.95 at Fortnum & Mason, paid out of the council's social fund, £162,000 at Amazon, including 2,966 transactions related to asylum seekers, £11,000 at Curry's, £70,000 at Argos, £12,000 with voucher line gift cards, all paid from migrant-related budgets, which the council then claimed back from central government. Why on earth are migrants who are already being given money to stay in this country, having contributed nothing, being given money by Kent County Council? You'll be stopping that, I hope.
Do you know what? Well, that's exactly what Zia Youssef, who is in charge of this Doge project, which effectively means going into these 10 councils. We'll take one at a time. We are meeting such resistance, but Zia is in charge of a team that's going in and looking for this outrageous spend, this outrageous waste of our taxpayers' money when we so desperately need, as we know, as we're hearing constantly, the Labour government are planning on cutting back on SEND provision for children. That's just one example of where we need critical support, public services, and yet it's money is being spent in this way on migrants. But those sort of things are outrageous, the trips and all the rest of it. But we know it's so much more serious than that, Peter. It's the housing. I have residents in Runcorn and Helsby being moved out of their housing association houses, being moved out of effectively YMCA type situations to enable illegal immigrants to be moved in. And this is what is so unjust and what people are so upset about. On the doorstep, I'm hearing it. In my campaign office, well, it's not a campaign office, it's now I forget I'm actually elected now.
Constituency office, yeah.
My constituency office. But people are coming in constantly telling me what a raw deal they're getting because of the illegal immigrations and the money it's costing us. We can't sustain it. We just can't sustain it.
Could ID cards, the government saying it's going to introduce digital ID cards for immigrants, could that help in some way?
That's not going to help whatsoever. The only thing that's going to help is gathering these illegal immigrants up, if they manage to make it as far as our shores, and deporting them back to where they came from. Why would we give them ID cards? Because at the end of the day, that's surely a step closer to settling here, to being in our system, making it easier for them to claim benefits, to claim whatever else we are just giving them. But the point is, don't get them in the system, get them out of the country.
Let me just ask you about two more topics before you go, Sarah. One is your former colleague, James McMurdoch, on the front page of the Sunday Times. Again, he allegedly borrowed tens of thousands of pounds in a COVID loans scheme, received a salary at the same time from an international bank. He denies any wrongdoing. So he's now not part of Reform UK at all.
That's right. So he's not part of Reform. He's gone independent. Look, it's deeply disappointing. I like James as a person, and so I'm really disappointed that this may be the situation. Of course, you know that I can't say anything. There's going to be an investigation.
Should there have been better vetting, though, Sarah?
Well, there wasn't any vetting at the time, of course. When James stood, I understand, obviously before my time, but I understand he was a paper candidate, which effectively means you put your name down, but you don't really think you're going to win. Yeah. He won. There was no vetting at all. And this is what happens. But Reform now are vetting heavily their candidates, which is why someone like myself, who has been attacked so much by the Labour Party, and they can't find anything on me because the vetting was done thoroughly. There's nothing there to see. And in somebody like myself, who's gone through now the very high standards of the Reform recruitment, what you have in me is somebody that the public can have confidence in and be absolutely sure of what they're getting.
I've had a bit of vetting myself when I worked in government, Sarah. It's a bit intrusive, isn't it? They ask you absolutely everything about your finances, your love life, and all the rest of it. You've had those kind of difficult conversations. Then it's not the easiest thing.
Actually, no one's asked me about my love life, Peter, but I'm quite happy to talk about that if you'd like to.
Okay, perhaps not on this occasion, Sarah, but maybe another occasion. Tell me, on a more serious note, I know you're taking part in a protest tomorrow in regard to Northern Ireland veterans. There's a lot of controversy about this because there were, of course, people in the armed services who did things they shouldn't have done. I'm happy that the law catches up with them. What I'm not happy with is people who were following orders, who did things that were signed off by very, very senior people, decades later being held accountable for things they were told to do. I just wonder what your perspective on this is, Sarah.
So I championed this position of the Northern Ireland prosecutions. I'm absolutely against this taking place. This government, in its manifesto, has brought in again the prosecutions of our brave Northern Ireland veterans that put their life on the line to save us from terrorism. And how do we reward them? Now this government is bringing back the prosecutions. There's a debate tomorrow in Westminster Hall. I will be speaking on this issue. I will be a voice for these veterans. I would like to reform. I hope we'll start a veterans club. I'd like to be the sponsor of that, the face of that. My dad was in the army. He did several tours of Northern Ireland at the absolute height of the Troubles. So it's something that's very, very close to my heart. I'll be speaking on it tomorrow. The veterans are in Parliament Square tomorrow afternoon from about 3 p.m, I believe. The debate starts at 4:30. We'll be covering this. Okay. We'll be speaking on it. And you know what? I mean, how could anybody prosecute these brave men that were just following orders?
As long as they kept within the law, no problems whatsoever. Sarah, listen, thank you for speaking to us this morning. That's Sarah Pochin there, who is the Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Hells. We appreciate her joining us. Harjap Singh Bangal is with us. He's an immigration lawyer. Harjap, thank you for joining us this morning. Is there any way this one in, one out scheme can actually work within the law, do you think? Or will it be seized upon by lawyers who say, don't deport my client?
No, it can definitely work within the law. So we used to have it before. Technically, under a Dublin Convention, it was very underused by the governments then. But it's a replacement for that, it's essentially, and it acts as a deterrent. Now, initially, they're going to be sending 50 people back a week. That's about 2,500 a year. But that's 2,500 more than what the current situation is. So what Sir Keir is doing, he's trying everything he can. And like he said, he would.
He's not trying everything he can, Harjap, is he? And will this really act as a deterrent? Will there really be migrants who say, look, I have a 6% chance of 1 in 17 to be deported back to France, therefore I'm not going to come across in a boat?
Peter, there is no one deterrent to this. There is no one deterrent. If you think that people who are willing to risk their lives to cross the sea are going to be deterred at the risk of being sent back to France, then, you know, that people are living in cloud cuckoo land. So the deterrent is to actually, with a combination of things, to try and stop the gangs. Now, the gangs are making more money in people smuggling than they are in drug smuggling. Now, when that sinks in, then you'll realise the scale of what it is, and your viewers will realise, well, hold on, we didn't know that there's more money made in people smuggling than drug smuggling. So what now has to happen is cooperation Europe-wide, and that's what's happening. So a lot of countries are now getting together in the EU and deciding, well, hold on.
There are many countries, though, Harjap, aren't there, who are doing much more serious things. I mean, Germany, for example, is just deporting everybody.
Well, the idea is to do deals with your neighbour. Like Italy has done a deal with Albania.
But you said earlier that Keir Starmer is doing everything he can. I mean, he's not. He could deport everybody. If Germany have done that, why can't we?
You can't deport 1.5 million people. That's how many people are estimated living in the UK without.
You could deport the people who are arriving illegally on our shores. You could do that. You could say, right, we're going to start right now.
And that's what this pilot scheme is going to introduce. But
1 in 17 isn't everybody, Harjap.
Yeah, Peter, but it's a pilot. So you can't do this without the cooperation of the French. Now, that's a problem when we did Brexit. When we did Brexit, nobody negotiated any return deals. Even up until last year, we only had return deals with 6 countries in the whole world. Now, you can only return people to 6 specific countries if they're from that country. That's how poorly the deal was negotiated. And in hindsight, which we all now have, that at the time, nobody pointed that out. They said, well, actually, people did point out where your return deals, but it was just ignored by the government at the time. France offered at the time as well, and only a few years ago, to the Conservatives to open a processing centre in France, which would have acted as some deterrent. And it even offered the land and to offer to help pay for it. that Conservative government outright refused it. So that's another option that has to be considered. All options have to be considered. And so the way Sir Keir sees it is sending 50 back a week is more than what's happening now, is 50 more than what's happening now. And if the pilot expands, it could go from 50 to 500. If it fails, it could just go back to 0 again, obviously. But if you don't try or you don't ask, you don't get. So that's the situation in relation to the deal. It's one deal better than what we've got at the moment. Whether it works or not, you know, I'm skeptical of that as well. I don't think that the gangs are going to be deterred by it. The gangs are way ahead.
Well, what would deter them? What would actually smash the gangs, Harjab?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what will smash the gangs. We have elite units, the Western world has. We can find Osama bin Laden holed up in Pakistan, pull him out.
Well, the Americans said that, but yes.
Libya, yeah, we can do that, right? We can do that as elite units. Why can't we get these gangs who, for the past 20 years, have been using the same route to traffic? It's almost like saying there's a bus driver and he drives a bus for the last 20 years from A to B, let's say from Rainham to Romford in Essex. Same guy, same bus, same passengers. And 20 years later, we ask the government, there's this one bus driver, you've got to get him. You've got to nab him. Oh, sorry, Gov, it's too smart for us. Yet they know the same route. We know the same route. It's Calais to Kent, right? So we know that route is there. So what you've got to have is tougher sentences. You've got to get these people. You've got to send out elite units who are fighting in wars and prepared for fighting in wars. We see them. We know they're around. And to get these heads of the gangs and round them up and pull them. If this government says, well, we can't touch them, or if the EU says we can't touch them, well, then how did you touch Osama bin Laden? How did you touch?
Yeah, it's a very fair point, and we should be able to arrest and charge them. Harjab, thank you. I appreciate that. Harjab Singh Bangal, who is an immigration lawyer. Cliff's been in touch from Berkshire and says, I'm of the opinion that any costs incurred for the illegal migrants should be deducted from the foreign aid budget. It is, after all, benefiting non-British people. I think that's fair enough, and actually some of the international aid budget is used on the asylum seekers, but perhaps not enough. John in Medway says, Macron's deal is good for him. He knows it will never get past the EU, so he can continue to export his illegals to us free of charge, courtesy of the unsmashed gangs. Jane says, the ID card is the slippery slope to bring it in for everyone, and then it'll be a cashless society. Give the migrants a passport. Oh wait, they threw it away in the channel. Wendy says, smash the gangs becomes break the model. When do we just stop the pull factor? And Debbie says, are we going to get reparations from the EU for the way they have destroyed our country through their open borders? One more before the break. Morning, Peter. Crazy golf and all the rest of the freebies for asylum seekers. My husband in a care home is in a care home with dementia. He worked 43 years in the same job. If he wants a visit from a chiropodist, he has to pay. Enough is enough. Send them back. Put the British people first, say Margaret and Lisa. Margaret, I'm sorry to hear that your husband is having those difficulties. I know you have many things that you're dealing with, including with Lisa, and I know you're working really, really hard to support your family. So listen, thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear about your husband, and that's disgraceful that you have to pay so much money. We're asking the question, how is Starmer going to solve the migrant crisis? We will find out what you think in just a few minutes, and we'll go to our debate desk. James Bealby is with us, as is Phil Dave. Don't go anywhere.
Unite, and now they've passed a motion saying it is time for Unite to examine its relationship with Labour. Now, Unite is just about the biggest donor.
42 million they've given them since 2010.
Yeah, they give them 1.2 million a year, and as you say, over the years, vast amounts of money. If Labour lose Unite's money, that will be significant.
UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch on all sorts of matters. We're going to discuss migration a bit more. We're also going to discuss a bit later on obesity and fat jabs as well, because Mary in County Down's been in touch and says eavesdropping in the hairdressers recently. So many women are either on the jabs or talking about them with friends and family who are on them, buying them online or from private clinics. It's not surprising, but it is really disturbing. There has to be a wider discussion about society and the lazy obsession with instant fixes. Remember the government advertising campaign, you don't need a pill for every ill, that was aimed at cutting the spiralling NHS pharmaceutical bill. So I wonder, are you on Ozempic or Mounjaro or any of these kind of jabs? Are they working for you? Are you worried perhaps about the long-term health consequences? Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. On illegal immigrants as well, Dawn's been in touch and said, when I saw Starmer and Macron unveiling their brilliant illegal migration plan, I thought, what could possibly go wrong? David in Essex says, I don't believe the illegal migrants are risking their lives crossing the channel. They're escorted by the French for 12 miles and picked up by our so-called border force taxi service to complete their journey. Zero risk. Well, David, people have died in the channel and there have been people severely injured as well, and kids have had chemical burns and things like that. So, I mean, there is a risk. Certainly, there's a risk with any voyage, certainly. So I don't think we can minimise that, David. But should they be coming? Of course they shouldn't. Heidi Alexander is the Transport Secretary and she's been speaking to Sky News this morning about this. We'll ask our debate desk panellists, Phil, Dave and James Bealby, about it in a second. But first, let's hear from the Transport Secretary about what she thinks about Starmer, about Macron, about this one-in, one-out deal this week.
We believe that we've got a robust, workable deal with President Macron. It's a deal that the previous government weren't able to negotiate. And I think this is ultimately the way in which we break the model of these international people smuggling gangs that are operating in multiple jurisdictions across Europe. We have to be making prosecutions. We're doing that not just in England and Wales, but in France and Germany.
All of that. But there's a matter.
That is why we have to be working with President Macron and our allies in Europe to tackle this problem. We're not going to be able to do it on our own.
Heidi Alexander there, the Transport Secretary. Phil, Dave is with us, the broadcaster. Great to see you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Peter. Hopefully you are as well.
And the political commentator, James Bealby, also here with us. Good to see you.
Good morning, Peter.
So this is going to break the model. It's going to smash the gangs. Everything's going to be marvellous. James?
I think that's absolutely not going to be the case. But there is no silver bullet here, is there, really? I mean, this is a move which is incremental, but it may well make a difference. I think the point that the government are trying to achieve is to introduce more legal routes, more safe routes. One of the reasons why people come in the boats is because a lot of the legal routes have been cut off, and it makes sense to try and work with the French, albeit we're never going to get on. This isn't necessarily going to turn the dial, but it's a step in the right direction. It's an incremental move. And I think, you know, it shows that this government is able to work with the French. You'll remember that Liz Truss was asked whether she thought Macron was a friend or a foe. She said the jury's out. I mean, that's just silly politics for a PM. A serious government works with other governments across the world, including the EU. So I think, you know, it makes sense to have some form of control enforcement where possible, and this is a step in the right direction.
Step in the right direction, Phil?
It seems like a very small step, but to be honest with you, I don't think it's a step in the right direction, because if it's a one-in, one-out policy, then we're no better off than we were before, and it's just going to cost a lot of money. The bottom line is...
You're better off in the sense that you have people who are not here illegitimately, who shouldn't be here.
Yeah, they're only here not illegitimately, because suddenly the government have said that they will be legitimate if they do this swap deal. The bottom line is...
the swap deal brings in migrants who would be legitimately here and have would be legitimate asylum seekers and have family links here.
The problem that you've got is that there are many people who believe that the issue with this country is that we are... I know that the expression full is obviously a bit daft, because land-wise we're not full, but infrastructure-wise it feels like we are. And you try telling people who are struggling to maybe get their children into schools, trying to struggle to get a doctor's appointment, medical treatment, and all of these things, that all resources that are put under pressure for additional people being here, then I just don't think that they're going to buy into it. And apart from anything, if you are going to sort of introduce a system that sort of sees like for like, well then actually we're sort of not really any better off.
It's interesting that, James, you're talking about doing what's possible. Well, we've seen from Germany, for example, that they're deporting every illegal migrant that comes. Now, okay, it's a land border on the sea border, but more can be done, can't it? There is a lot more that Keir Starmer could do if he really wanted to.
Yeah, and I think this is his plan. It's the first step in a longer-term plan. And this is the first agreement we've had for France since Brexit. So I think, yes, there is more that you can do, but it has to be incremental. The idea that, somebody like a Reform Party or Nigel Farage could come in and instantly stop the boats overnight is absolutely for the birds. I mean, the costs alone of whatever he's proposing are absolutely totally disproportionate and will never be able to be achieved. So I think you take these small steps. Yes, obviously everybody wants to stop the boats. We're never going to stop the boats entirely.
Do you think everyone wants to stop them? I really don't get the impression that everyone wants to stop.
So
I wish
some people want boats coming over, do they?
Well, I personally feel like there are plenty of people who have certainly those who are in power, have got no desire to stop this. So certainly it feels like it.
I'm not sure about that.
Send in the Navy. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you have to, patrol the waters, do whatever you've got to do.
Well, we had a former Navy officer who contacted us yesterday and said the problem is if you send in the Navy, they will do what they are trained to do, which is kill people, and they don't want to do that. And you know and I know, Phil, that were the Navy to go in and were they to point guns at people and someone was to fall off a boat, drown, or somewhere were to get injured, they'll be held to pay.
This is very true, but I put it to you like this, that there are people who have entered this country illegally who have gone on to kill British citizens, and what would you rather? That's the awful truth of it. You can look at it whatever way you want.
As a killer. That's a ridiculous thing to say.
It's not ridiculous. It's you don't know where these people come from, and they pose a security threat.
That's why we need more safe routes. That's why we need more routes for people to come here safely.
We've got safe routes.
But a lot of those have been closed off.
It's almost like we don't want them here, then, isn't it? No, we've got the safe routes. They do exist. Okay. There's a reason for it.
Let's go to Charlie in Reigate. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Charlie, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and with Phil and James. What would you like to say?
Morning, Peter. Morning, Phil. Morning, James. This is all rubbish. 50 in and 50 out. But I've never heard. It's probably the most ridiculous thing to come out of Keir Starmer's mouth since he's become Prime Minister. Okay, absolute. I won't swear. Rubbish. Absolute.
Is it not even, as James says, a step in the right direction?
Well, why is it a step in the direction? You're not even getting rid of the numbers. You're sending 50 back that will come back next week. You're sending 50 back and accepting 50 in. It's absolute rubbish.
I mean, James, Charlie has a reason. Hold on a second, Charlie. I'll get the opinions of James and Phil, and then I'll come back to you, I promise. James, Charlie's got a reasonable point there in that the actual numbers aren't going down with this scheme at all.
No, but it may well stop people taking the risk of going in those boats, which, as you've clearly identified, is very dangerous.
Do you think it will actually act as a deterrent?
Well, that's got to be the hope, hasn't it?
It's the hope, but is it the reality?
The hope. Come on, we need to. I just don't understand why people don't realise the seriousness of this situation. This is not the reason why ancestors of this country lost their lives during the World War to protect these shores. They are ultimately they've made the ultimate sacrifice just for us to go and mess it up, like however many decades later. It's ridiculous.
Messing it up, James?
Well, I think, as I say, this is the first step. So working with France on this may well lead to a better agreement where we can send people back. It's not going to happen overnight. Diplomacy is difficult. And on the world stage... It's a year,
though. It's a year, and this is what Starmer's come up with. He's running out of time, isn't he?
Well, yeah, this is true. And I think, as Charlie says, there's some of the things he's said leave a lot to be desired. Yeah. I wouldn't say this is the worst thing he's done.
OK. Charlie?
Peter, there's one way to stop these people and one way to stop them only. Stop the gravy train. When they come over, when they land here illegally, you stick them in an army camp that's guarded. OK, they're safe. If I tried to enter America or Europe or any other country on this planet, I'd be detained. Okay? These people are getting picked up midway through the channel. They're getting hotels, they're getting phone cards, they're getting TV licenses, and people like me that knock my pipe out Monday to Friday every week of the year are getting sick to death of it. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, every person I speak to has had enough. They have.
Well, what do you?
We're being taken for mugs by our government. They are not listening. They are not listening, and everybody is angry, and nobody's going to stand for it, Peter.
Charlie,
honestly, come on.
I think you're making a lot of sense there, Charlie. What do you make of what Starmer has tweeted this morning? People are right to be angry when they see others disrespecting our laws. Now those who try to make the crossing illegally will soon find themselves back where they started. That is a real deterrent. That's what Keir Starmer has said on Twitter. What do you make of that, Charlie?
Keir Starmer is Macron's boy. Keir Starmer is a yes man. He's a communist. And the last thing he wants is to stop. Keir Starmer wants to fill the country up with illegal and non-illegal, non-white people, non-Christian people. He hates the country. He doesn't like England. He's anti-British. And I'll tell you what, he's probably the most dangerous man to be running this country at this time.
Charlie,
at least he's not Jeremy Corbyn.
Charlie, thanks for your thoughts. I mean, Charlie makes a good point there, and actually there's a story in the Mail on Sunday today about the Reform UK, an audit showing that Kent County Council, which they now control, spent all this money on asylum seekers, including £162,000 on Amazon, 2,966 transactions related to asylum seekers, £11,000 at Curry, £70,000 at Argos, £12,000 with voucher line gift cards, all paid from migrant-related budgets, which the council then claimed back from central government. James, you can understand why people are angry about this.
Yes.
Especially with council tax bills going up and up.
Absolutely. But what that story doesn't say is that most of those were children, and Kent County Council and others would have spent the same amount on Indigenous children as well. These are children who've been in care, who are care leavers, and the state has a duty of care to those people. So a lot of this expense, yes, it sounds a lot, but as much, if not vastly more, is spent on Britons as well.
But sorry, but the difference is Indigenous children, as you put it, are this country's problem. Children who've come from another country, possibly illegally, possibly legally, who knows, are not our problem. They weren't our problem.
But they are our problem now, Phil, and they're here, and it's not their fault. It's not the children's fault.
These are people who've been granted asylum, so they are here by right.
If there are people who've been granted asylum, fine, but at the same time, you can't possibly tell me that people who have entered this country and have not put anything into the tax system should be a burden onto the children.
They haven't worked because they don't have any purchasing power.
I would blame the parents.
Well, they might have led persecution by their parents. You never know.
Okay, well,
do you know what? I mean, there's just no excuse as far as I'm concerned. Taxpayer, hard-working. I don't want my money going to people that I don't care about. How can I put it?
Well, we're going to talk about lots of other aspects, including James McMurdoch, the Reform MP, is no longer a Reform MP. We're going to talk about anti-Semitism being normalised in the middle classes as well. Lots more to discuss. Your calls are coming in as well. We'll put some of those to James and to Phil. Stay with us here on Talk, and do get your call in 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Phil, Dave and James Bealby are still on the debate desk. If you want to talk to them, give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about what's on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph as well. It's a lovely picture of the Princess of Wales, but a very serious story, which is about anti-Semitism rife amongst the middle class. Racism against Jewish people normalised across the NHS, education and the arts. This is a report by two politicians from contrasting parties, Labour's John Mann, Lord Mann, and also Penny Mordaunt, the former Defence Secretary. And the review says that Jewish people in the UK are suffering increasing prejudice in our professions, cultural life and public services, and they felt they were being tolerated rather than respected. Phil, Dave.
Where do I start? Well, the short answer is yes. This is the truth. This is the truth, no doubt about it. I'm speaking as someone who is Jewish. Fortunately, I don't look it, so there's a result of it. I don't really sort of face quite...
You're honestly saying, fortunately, I don't look Jewish?
Yeah, well, at least I don't face the same struggles that some of the more stereotypical members of the community face when, of course, they sort of wear the big hats and they have the hair down the side of their heads and stuff like that. So, you know, if you sort of look more Jewish, then you are more susceptible to it, unfortunately. I think that the answer to this is very simple, is that for starters, we've got to stop calling it anti-Semitism. I'm so sick of it being treated like something different. It's racism, simple as. You know, if you're going to pick on someone just based on their religion, that's racist. And that is exactly what we're facing with week in, week out, these ridiculous pro-Hamas marches that we see in London. And yes, they are pro-Hamas.
Not everybody on those marches is pro-Hamas.
Not everyone who goes on them is, but they are organised by people who are pro-Hamas, and that is the difference. This is the problem. You've got people who go on the marches and don't even know what they are marching for. You know, even something as simple as if you were to ask someone what the slogan "From the River to the Sea" means, they don't know, they don't realise it means the annihilation of Israel and subsequently the annihilation of global Jewry as well. And if they don't know that, well, then it's not really a wonder this is on the rise. You see social media not doing anywhere near enough to tackle the rubbish that's on there all the time. Like, literally, I could scroll on Twitter and I see this propaganda left, right and centre everywhere. Why? Because it brings in the clicks, it brings in the money for them. They don't want to tackle it. Why would they? So it's not really a wonder. It's blooming irritating, to say the least. But yeah, what can
James
I tell
Spielby,
you?
have you seen in the middle class, in the NHS and education and the arts, have you seen or heard anti-Semitism, remarks that would be completely ridiculous? I know I have, where they said about black people, women, you know, Muslims, whatever.
Yes, I think obviously anti-Semitism is rife in society. I totally agree with everything that Phil said, but not to the same extent that you might get. It's more dog whistle stuff as opposed to open comments about, as you might get against Muslims or black people. But, you know, you're talking about social media. We saw this week with Grok, Elon Musk's chatbot, came out with some pro-Hitler comments. You know, so it really is rife across social media, and I think that's one of the areas that needs to be tackled, because people are able to give expression to these extreme views without any recourse.
Yeah, I mean, we are the home of free speech here. What we are not the home of is hate speech.
Yeah.
And what is really worrying, I think, is the fact that, I mean, we're talking about rife among the middle class. We're not talking about people who are members of, you know, anti-Jewish organisations necessarily. We're talking about people saying things. The best example I can give of this is Bob Vylan. So this was 2 weeks ago, and I would question whether a musician, I use the term loosely, would be Pascal Robinson Foster, would be kept on air by, I'm not making this anti-BBC, but the BBC, and people would have shouted back, death, death to the IDF. Thousands of people at Glastonbury, often middle class people paying hundreds of pounds to be there. Had he said death, death to Muslims, death, death to black people, death, death to women, for example?
Of course, absolutely, totally agree, yeah. But they're big because of what's happened in Gaza since October the 7th. You know, people are able to give views or expression to views about the response of Israel. The rights and wrongs of that are not to be discussed here, but I think that does tip over into anti-Semitism.
What's that got to do with Jewish people?
Well,
he's not saying it is.
I'm not saying
no, but that's the point, though. This is where the problem lies. Is that in exactly the same way that if I don't know, if the Pope made some sort of announcement about Catholicism, I wouldn't blame every single Catholic around the world. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of lunacy and stupidity that we're up against.
That's the line, isn't it? That's what's happening. So people are talking about Israel, and that's becoming anti-Semitic.
No, I know, but that is the problem, though. Is that it's almost like they can't disassociate the fact that just because Israel happens to be the only Jewish state in the world, that it somehow means every single Jew around the world does this.
Yeah. Phil, what is it about Jewish people, do you think? What is it that people think it's okay to say it? What do you think it is? Is it just the ancient hatred? Is it the blood libel? Is it just that it's always been around? Because I do hear people say things about Jewish people, Zionists, Diane Abbott talking about the Jewish Defence Force. No, it's the Israeli Defence Force, for example. There is this anti-Semitism that does exist, and for some reason, middle class people, I'm not saying they're any better or any worse than working class people. What I'm saying is that the people who wouldn't dream of saying something that was racist against black people or Muslims or women or gay people or whatever, but they say it against Jews. Why is that, do you think?
Well, several reasons. Number one, I'd say first and foremost, is because that people wrongly think the vast majority of Jewish people are white. therefore you can't be racist against someone who's white. It's exactly the same as we see with anti-Christian language as well. The way people denigrate Christianity, it makes me sick in this country. It is a Christian country first and foremost. It's founded on Christian values, and if people can't appreciate that, then don't live here, as simple as. But put that to one side. The other reason is because there's this age-old adage about how people love underdogs, and the truth is that there is a disproportionate number in the Jewish community who do quite well for themselves. And the main reason for it is not because, as people think, we control the media or control the banks. That is not the case at all. Believe me, if I controlled the media, I wouldn't be doing necessarily what I do here. However...
You're very welcome on the programme, Phil.
No, I'm enjoying this. But in terms of the... as for the banks, please, I wouldn't live in Watford. But no, the point is that if people don't realise that it's because it's a work ethic, it's for so many hundreds of years having to prove yourself worthy and to actually make a difference in the community you're lucky enough to live in. That's where it comes from. It's nothing to do with controlling. Yeah. Furthermore, it's actually born out of a religious mantra, which is known as tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, to make it a better world. And as a result of it, that's why people are driven to success. So I think when you see a disproportionate number of Jewish people in either high-end jobs or in successful positions, then unfortunately that can breed jealousy, and jealousy can breed an awful lot of hatred. So I think it's a multiple of things.
How do we get a grip on this, James Bealby?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I'm not sure I've got the answer, really. I think calling it out, as Phil says, and I think Phil makes a really good point about the status of a lot of Jewish people in society and in culture. For somebody like Jeremy Corbyn or people on the hard left, they like to see people as victims, and they like to be on the side of the victim, whereas Jewish people often aren't victims because they're successful in their own right. So therefore they don't see it as racism, and they think it's fair game to be able to criticise them. I think we need to call that out and say that's wrong.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Semitic?
I think he is, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's slightly weird, though, in the sense that they don't seem to disassociate. It's not because of someone is Jewish that they've done something. This is where it's exactly the same way you wouldn't say that person's a doctor because he's Christian. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of stupidity.
My son, the doctor, is drowning.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not because of someone's religion that they... I mean, I've sort of countered that argument by sort of saying that we're brought up in that kind of way.
But it's a culture. It's
cultural rather than religious.
It's a work ethic.
They don't move as a group, do they? People don't move as a group. I mean, I come from a Christian background. My parents are Christians, but I don't identify as a group of people, as lots of people with different views within the Christian world,
And, parents who want their kids to do well, maybe even slightly pushy. Being a Protestant from Northern Ireland, I have absolutely no knowledge or experience of that whatsoever. Thank you to Sonia in Somerset, who says, love your show, Peter. Even better today with Phil. He's spot on. Instead of all these people coming here, why don't they stay in their own country and make their own countries better, just like the British have done and do. Thanks to David in Worcestershire, who says the illegal immigrants are part of the Labour growth strategy. They all add to GDP, expensive hotel rooms, food services, build them homes, let them out into society to work for delivery, etc. It's all about growing the economy. It's Reeves's economically illiterate growth strategy, that and borrowing money and pumping it into the economy, hoping for growth. The only growth is our debt. Well, we're going to talk about tax in just a second as well. We're also asking the question, how is Starmer going to solve the migrant crisis? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Unite are now, they've passed a motion saying it is time for Unite to examine its relationship with Labour. Now, Unite is just about the biggest donor.
42 million they've given them since 2010.
Yeah, they give them 1.2 million a year, and as you say, over the years, vast amounts of money. If Labour lose Unite's money, that will be significant.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Well, thanks to everybody who's been in touch quite a lot on migration. Alan is in Liverpool and says ID cards but only for immigrants. What a ludicrous scheme. They think we're stupid. Migrants had an ID document that they threw into the sea. So what are they going to do with the ID cards? We'll be told it's a huge success and we're all to help them. This gang of closet Marxists need to be kicked out of the doors of Parliament. And Leslie says this deal is to appease the British people who are disgusted with the destruction which Tory and Labour parties have encouraged to happen to our country. For some reason, both parties, our police, our justice system, our councils, are all scared of upsetting the Muslim community. Until we get Reform UK into number 10, our country is doomed to become a Muslim country. I'm in my 70s. I live in fear of the life I will be living with my children and grandchildren. Please God, enough of Britain. Wake up and vote for Reform UK, says Leslie. Leslie, all I would say is you don't need to be afraid of Muslims. Okay, lots of Muslims are great members of society who contribute a lot, who pay into our tax system, who are upstanding, fine people. The problem is Islamism. The problem is people who want to destroy our society. The problem is people who don't believe in our British values. Let's hear from Paul, who sent a voice note to me and to Phil and James, who are with us on the debate desk and will be for the next 10 minutes before we speak to Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. Let's hear what Paul has to say.
Good morning, Peter. It's Paul up in Hartlepool. Phil and James, I'd like to point out to you lads, we're absolutely overwhelmed with HMOs up here. Absolutely overwhelmed. You cannot get a doctor's appointment for 2 or 3 weeks. You cannot walk the streets safely now. A 70-year-old man was murdered up here by an illegal immigrant some 16, 17 months ago. The situation is out of control and it is no longer safe for elderly people such as my wife and myself to walk the streets. Please wise up and realise that we need to break every international agreement and stop this illegal immigration immediately.
James, what would you say to Paul?
I'm sorry to hear that he doesn't feel safe. I'm not quite sure where he was calling from, but I don't think that is right. I mean, yes, obviously one attack is one too many, but most people are safe in the streets. I don't think we live in a lawless society.
I would like to think we don't, but unfortunately there is plenty of evidence to suggest otherwise.
Paul's in Hartlepool, by the way, just been told.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, first and foremost, with Paul referencing there, by the way, HMOs, House of Multiple Occupation or Occupancy, what he's referring to is the way that sort of a lot of migrants are sort of put into these HMOs in a bid to try and sort of alleviate sort of the pressure of them being homeless, if you like. But of course, it sort of echoes what I was saying before, of the knock-on effect of trying to get doctor's appointments and things like that for those who have actually paid into the tax system all of their life. I just don't think that there's any two ways about it until you start prioritising those who actually invest in Britain, in other words, taxpayers who work hard and pay hard as well to actually sort of ensure this country is in a good, sound place. You're never going to sort this because there are always going to be people who are going to take advantage for as long as they are allowed to take advantage.
I want to play another voice note from Nick now. This is what Nick has to say.
Peter, Nick Moore, Loughborough. People like Harjap Singh Bangal and his ilk are part of the problem. Indeed, I'd say they're complicit in the misery of the small boats crisis, because the last thing they want to do is upset the status quo that allows them to make fortunes out of defending the indefensible at the cost to our British public. I think these people are a disgrace, and the one way to stop the immigrant crisis is to put a leash on these immigration lawyers and take away some of their power. Have a good day, Pete.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. I'm sure Harjit Singh Bangal would say that he is not complicit in misery and would deny the accusations that Nick has made, but it does certainly show the real frustration that people have. Just a final word on migration. There are a few other things I want to talk about from Phil, Dave, and then James.
Okay, well, very quickly, I mean, I think that if you leave Harjit out of it and actually sort of focus on lawyers in general, who in their right mind is going to say that they would support something that would see a decrease in their income? No one in their right mind would do that. So I'm not in the least bit surprised that lawyers like Starmer would be in favour of more migration if it potentially means that there's more money to be made. Stands to reason.
Debbie's been in touch as well and says Harjit and his lawyer friends are part of the problem, just giving benefits to these invaders, detain them and they won't come. Just a final word from James Bealby.
Yeah, I think we haven't touched on the digital ID idea.
Sure.
This will make it harder for them to get benefits if we had that digital scheme in the UK. I'm all for it. I think ID cards should be rolled out to everyone. But
why do you think that?
Because it makes it much easier to be part of society. You know who's here, you know who's got a right to be here. It improves public services. It means it makes it easier to vote. It makes it easier to buy restricted age products. We've all got ID because we've all got mobile phones. Everything that you do is already tracked.
Does that shock you? I I agree.
There we go. Found agreement at last.
Completely agree.
Marvellous. It had to happen eventually. The good news is I'm against digital ID cards. So there we are. Lots more to discuss. I want to play just another clip from Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, talking about tax, because tax, as we know, is the highest in this country since the Second World War as a proportion of GDP of what the country makes. This is what Heidi Alexander said about Rachel Reeves, about taxation, about where the country's going economically.
The Chancellor will set her budget. I'm not going to sit in a TV studio today and speculate on what the contents of that budget might be. We are determined that
I'm just saying tax rises must be on the table.
Well, when it comes to taxation, fairness is going to be our guiding principle. We took that difficult decision to increase national insurance contributions paid by employers, but we did that. It was necessary to do that.
Forgive me,
in order to get the investment into public
I don't want to spend too much on...
James, you're an employer, you know about national insurance rises. Is Heidi Alexander right? Was this necessary?
The national insurance increase has had a massive negative impact on employers. When it went up in April, we've seen from the hospitality industry, for example, thousands of people are no longer recruiting because of the cost of doing it. Labour, when they came in, said they had the 22 billion black hole. Whether that's right or wrong, not for now. We're not going to agree on that. And they had to do something. This was the wrong move. They should have put up income tax for the most wealthy in society.
They should put up income tax for the wealthiest, Phil?
Or here's a thought, maybe they shouldn't have an imaginary black hole in the first place. I mean, look, the problem is that one of the first things they did was give a pay rise to train drivers who were causing havoc. So actually...
And junior doctors who are causing even more havoc now by asking for yet another pay rise.
Half of that £22 billion black hole, or whatever amount of money it was that they decided to give to train drivers just to pacify their nonsense, it could have been saved. They didn't need to spend that money on them. They could have actually turned around and say, be grateful you've got a job. If you don't like it, off you trot.
We should say that it was ASLEF train drivers. Every time I just say train drivers in general, I get angry messages from train drivers who aren't ASLEF train drivers. Ashley is in London. Ashley, we just have a couple of minutes left. Let us know what your thoughts are on the stories of the day. I think it's anti-Semitism you've given us a ring about.
Yeah, morning, Peter.
Morning.
It was one thing that hit me. It's a couple of things. I've been posting to... there's a post continuously coming up which basically depicts us Jews as, in the words, it's basically 9 boxes, and it says... the picture is of a so-called Jewish person with a long nose and the beard, and typical trope, bent over with Facebook on their arm, and it's saying, basically, these people, the Jews, Federal Reserve, internet spying, Hollywood TV, law courts, cancer industry, pornography, sex trafficking, wars for Israel, fake people, fake opposition.
So very, very anti-Semitic in many ways.
Very anti-Semitic. So just an example about how it spreads through the middle class, and I've experienced some of it, not huge amounts of it, but we quite clear it's there, is that I've reported it probably about 7 or 8 times. Each time it gets rejected as saying it doesn't breach the community rules of Facebook and Instagram, right? And you know, as long as that sort of, and that picture's being shared and shared and shared. You can see it's being shared and shared and shared, right? So what it does, it demonises and normalises everything that's happening to us Jews in the country. It's like, oh, well, they must be, sex trafficking. They create wars.
Well, of course, if you've reported that a number of times, I'm sure you've done that, and I've reported things to Twitter. Sometimes it was one not nearly as bad as all that, but there was somebody called me a patty potato. I mean, that's clearly racist and straightforwardly. So, actually, I mean, how do we get a grip on this? How do we change this?
Oh, that's the question I asked. I don't know, because it's become normalisation. For us, I'll give you an example. Last year, I went to hospital. I had stomach problem, went in. The guy looked at me, and he was looking at me. And he was clearly a Muslim guy. And it's not every Muslim, clearly, right? But he just turned around and said to me, "That's because of all this bloody kosher food you eat." Right now, it just so happens that I actually don't, right? But I get my stuff from Tesco's, right? So it's this. You're constantly. You're not a person.
Yeah.
If I turned it around the other way, people would be screaming. It's normalisation. We all brought up as Jews. I mean, the chap in the audience that's with you today will probably tell you. We're brought in. It's kind of drummed into us what happened to us back in.
Of course, and rightly so. Yeah. Actually, we're going to talk. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. It's just I'm going to run out of time. I just want a quick reaction from Phil and from James. Phil.
Well, I think first and foremost, I was going to say to Ashley, I think that's bad luck there if he doesn't eat kosher food and he's still got stomach problems. But anyway, but yeah, look, I wished I could sort of find holes in the argument. I can't, I too have reported several things and it never gets taken down from social media.
Briefly, James?
Turn off social media, don't use it. It's pernicious. The invention of social media has ruined our society.
Hear, hear.
Okay, well, there we are. Strong views from both Phil Dave, the broadcaster and the political commentator. James Bealby, thank you both for joining us. Today on the debate desk, we've got the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, next. Tell us what you think I should ask him. You can drop me a text on 87222 with the word talk in your text if you have any ideas or thoughts that you want me to ask him. I love when I get to do that. You can give me a ring as well, 0344 499 1000. We're asking the question about how we solve the migration crisis. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. We're speaking about the migration plan from Keir Starmer. Do you think it'll work? Let us know your thoughts. We'll ask the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, in just a second for his view. We'll also be talking about digital IDs for migrants. We'll also have a chat about anti-Semitism, because there's a big report out on Tuesday from John Mann and from Labour and Penny Mordaunt from the Conservatives, saying that it is a scourge, especially in the middle classes. What do you think of all these issues? We'll be talking about Ozempic as well. Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing? What about the longer term health worries? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, there are three ways you can get in touch on the main number 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. That number one more time, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Well, let's go straight to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, who is standing by. Chris, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
Let me ask you first about migration. Of course, as a former Home Office Minister, you will know about this, and the Shadow Home Secretary as well. Keir Starmer has tweeted this morning, people are right to be angry when they see others disrespecting our laws. Now, those who try to make the crossing illegally will soon find themselves back where they started. That is a real deterrent. What do you make about what the Prime Minister says?
Well, I'm afraid it's not going to be a real deterrent, even if the European Union agree the deal, because under the arrangement that was proposed last week, only 6% of illegal immigrants crossing the Channel will wind up back in France. 94% will stay here, and letting 94% of illegal immigrants stay is obviously going to be no deterrent at all. People are angry. They're angry that under Keir Starmer's premiership and under Yvette Cooper as Shadow Home Secretary, illegal crossings have gone up by over 40% since the election. And in fact, this year so far, 2025, has been the worst year in history for illegal immigration across the Channel. That is down to Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, and people are definitely very angry with the pair of them.
The one-in, one-out scheme was something that the Conservatives pushed for under your government, though. Isn't that something that you would welcome in some sense?
Well, we wanted a scheme where 100% of illegal immigrants arriving got removed.
But Keir Starmer says that's what he's pushing towards. He says this is a pilot that could move in that direction.
Well, I mean, they're not even confirming any numbers. All the reporting says it's only going to be 50 a week, which amounts to only 6% of arrivals. So that's nowhere, not even close, not even a majority. So if you've got a 6% chance of winding up back in France and a 94% chance of making it to the UK, you know, illegal immigrants are going to keep making the attempt to cross the Channel. It's not going to work at all.
What would work?
Well, what would have worked, I think, is a 100% removals deterrent where pretty much everybody got removed. We did something similar, actually, with Albania a couple of years ago, and that was very effective. But the Rwanda scheme would have done this. That would have seen 100%
though,
of arrivals.
That's not 100% though, would it?
Well, it would have been 100% of arrivals ending up in Rwanda, and within a matter of 2 or 3 months, the deterrent effect of that would mean that people would stop attempting the crossing, and we know that would work because it worked in Australia.
But the original numbers,
12 or 13
Chris,
years ago.
The original numbers for Rwanda were not everybody, though. It was only a few hundred. That was a pilot scheme as well, which is a similar number anyway to what Keir Starmer wants to do.
Well, the Rwanda scheme was numerically uncapped, and as I said, it would only take 2 or 3 months worth of removals before people would stop bothering to try in the first place if they realised they were certain or very near certain to end up in Rwanda. People in France, the illegal immigrants in France or beyond, wouldn't bother attempting the crossing. Why would you attempt it if you're going to wind up in Rwanda? But you know, a 6% return rate, it's not going to make any difference, is it? And I'm afraid the worst ever numbers in history that we've seen under Keir Starmer will continue. His previous gimmick, if you remember, Peter, about a year ago, he was saying, oh, we're going to smash the gangs. Well, you don't hear Keir Starmer or Yvette Cooper talk about that anymore because it's failed so laughably, and we've ended up with the worst ever figures in history. history so far this year. The Smash the Gangs claim was a gimmick, and this new deal is a gimmick as well.
What do you think about ID cards for only for migrants? This is under plans being worked out by Yvette Cooper, your opposite number.
Well, I think making sure we can verify everybody's identity is a good idea. People have proposed some form of digital identity for people here either illegally or for people here legally for that matter, or indeed anyone who is accessing taxpayer-funded services. I think there is some merit in that idea, and we'll obviously study the detail.
So are you pro ID cards for everybody then?
Well, I think if you go as far as that, Peter, then you do start getting into questions about civil liberties. So that is a much bigger question that requires some very careful thought. But there are obviously some important civil liberties questions you start engaging if they become mandatory for everybody. That is a different thing entirely.
So what do you think? I mean, you've said you need some big thoughts about it. What are your big thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm not yet persuaded that universal mandatory ID is merited because of those civil liberties arguments.
But you think it could help with the legal? But you think it could help with illegal immigrants?
Well, look. So I'm not persuaded of the case. I do think when it comes to people who are not British citizens, then I think there is a case, and indeed people who are accessing taxpayer-funded services, to have to prove, like benefits, for example, to have to prove that they are genuinely entitled to those benefits. I can see a lot of merit in doing that to make sure that if the taxpayer is going to fund things like that, benefits, for example, then the person receiving taxpayer-funded services should have to prove they are genuinely entitled to them in a more robust way than happens at the moment.
Speaking of taxpayer-funded services, we have a message from one of our listeners who says, ask Chris Philp, will the Tories commit to an immediate and blanket withdrawal of legal aid for all asylum seekers? What do you think of that idea?
Well, we think we should basically, people who arrive illegally should not end up in the court system at all. We think they should all be removed, either back to their country of origin if safe, or a third country like Rwanda or somewhere else if their home country is not safe. And we don't think there should be any legal process around that at all. All these, modern slavery claims, human rights claims, asylum claims, we think if someone's arrived illegally from a safe country like France, there should be no judicial process at all, because nobody needs to leave France to flee persecution. France is a safe country. We think, and in fact we tabled a bill in Parliament saying that people arriving illegally from a safe country, so we're thinking particularly about the small boats, should be removed straight away. No legal process, which therefore obviously means no legal aid. We also think, by the way, while we're at it, we should repeal the Human Rights Act in relation to immigration matters to end all of these ridiculous cases where judges prevent the removal of foreign criminals on absurdly flimsy grounds, like, for example, that Zimbabwean paedophile who wasn't sent back to Zimbabwe because he might face, quote, some hostility back in Zimbabwe, and that apparently would breach his human rights. But what about the human rights of children to be protected here? The judges don't seem to pay much attention to the human rights of people in this country to be protected from foreign criminals. So we think the Human Rights Act should be repealed when it comes to immigration matters.
I want to ask you as well about anti-Semitism, because it's become normalised in middle-class Britain. This is a review co-authored by Lord Mann, the government's anti-Semitism advisor, John Mann, and Dame Penny Mordaunt. Just reporting at the moment, the report hasn't been released. It will be released until Tuesday, but I'm sure you know and I know, Chris, many Jewish people who faced ridiculous, outrageous and unlawful racism. And do you believe that anti-Semitism is rife among the middle classes?
Well, I believe there is a problem with anti-Semitism in this country, I'm afraid to say. The number of anti-Semitic reports in the last couple of years has gone up very, very dramatically. And I think it's the responsibility of the government, the police, and wider society to make sure no one suffers racial abuse, including obviously this very serious anti-Semitic racial abuse that has increased so much. We need to make sure that where people incite racial hatred, where people incite violence, they are dealt with by the police. Those are criminal offences, and they should always be investigated and prosecuted. And so the Jewish community here should be protected. They should feel safe, and that, unfortunately, at the moment is not the case.
I just wonder if I can ask you about tax, because Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, has been on the round this morning, like you, talking to different broadcasters. Just want to play a very short clip of what she has said about tax. This is her speaking to Sky News a bit earlier on.
The Chancellor will set her budget. I'm not going to sit in a TV studio today and speculate on what the contents of that budget might be. We are determined that
I'm just saying tax rises must be on the table.
Well, when it comes to taxation, fairness is going to be our guiding principle. We took that difficult decision to increase national insurance contributions paid by employers, but we did that. It was necessary to do that.
Forgive me,
in order to get the investment into public
I don't want to spend too much on...
Is it your policy, Chris Philp, to lower taxes?
Well, the Conservatives do believe in lower taxes, and of course what Heidi Alexander was saying in that clip basically was the British public can expect even more tax increases in the autumn budget. They obviously lied about tax before the election.
I mean, your government put up taxes to a huge degree, Chris Philp, the highest burden of taxation since the Second World War as a proportion of GDP. You're not a low tax party, are you?
Well, I mean, we were obviously dealing with the aftermath of COVID. Labour lied before the election when they said they weren't going to put up taxes. They put through the biggest tax increases in a generation just after the election, and as a consequence, unemployment has gone up every single month under this Labour government. The economy has actually shrunk for the last 2 months. That is because of the choices that Labour have made in government, and they've totally failed to control welfare because Keir Starmer is too weak to control his own backbenchers. The consequence of those things is even more tax rises coming in the autumn, and they will fall on working people and businesses, and we'll get in this sort of awful death spiral where taxes go up, the economy shrinks, taxes go up even more because of the mistakes Labour have made, because Labour broke their election promises, and we will be opposing Labour's tax increases every step of the way. And I think what Heidi Alexander accidentally did this morning was let the cat out of the bag by admitting there are more tax rises coming because of Labour's failings since the general election.
It's almost certainly going to happen, isn't it? I just wondered, before you go, Chris, if I could ask you about Norman Tebbit. Norman Tebbit died this week. He was, of course, a towering figure in the Conservative movement. A lot of people saying that he was Cabinet Minister as well. Many people saying that his brand of muscular conservatism, the fact that he fought so hard for the causes he believed in, the fact he said things really bluntly, like his father got on his bike and got a job, that's the kind of conservatism that is needed these days.
Well, I agree, and I think it's the kind of conservatism that people are now seeing under new leadership by Kemi. I mean, taking that example you just gave, Kemi gave a whole speech on Thursday, just a few days ago, explaining how we need to get welfare payments down, have face-to-face medical examinations so people can't basically get signed off as entitled to welfare payments and disability benefits in particular without even getting looked at by a doctor. So Kemi's speech last Thursday, I think it was, is, I think, in the finest traditions of that muscular conservatism we saw from Margaret Thatcher and Norman Tebbit and others during the 1980s. We need that again.
OK, Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, thank you for joining us here on Talk. Appreciate your time this morning. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, should say we did ask her to come on. She said she didn't have time. Now then, lots of people getting in touch, including Ben in Belfast, talking about Ozempic. It's a dark, dangerous, lazy, quick fix that is not sustainable or healthy on the long run for the morbidly obese and very overweight diabetics under strict medical supervision. It might be a solution to help save, improve or prolong their lives, but for someone who's just carrying 2 stones because he or she loves too many Jaffa cakes and Chinese carryouts, jabs are not the answer. Dave in South Gloucester says the difference between Rwanda and this latest potty scheme of Starmer and Macron was that for every migrant removed for Rwanda, we didn't have to accept a migrant with tenuous links to the UK who would be granted leave to remain and then bring numerous dependents over. This will actually increase migration. This scheme is a scam and does nothing for the control of immigration numerically and only benefits France and Starmer's voting base, says Dave in South Gloucester. Steve in Kent says you need an ID card to vote and open bank accounts, drive a car or travel overseas. So what's the real issue with ID cards? We have a horrible time joining the dots between government services. There's no joined up record keeping in the NHS. For example, if there was a secure and central digital ID mechanism, civil protections under GDPR, it would be easier to manage because there would be a common point to manage and secure it. I do wonder, Steve, whether we trust the government with our information. Do you think digital ID cards are a good idea for migrants or for everybody? Let me know your thoughts. Lots of people getting in touch about some of our voice notes as well. Paul in Hartlepool is praised by Jason in the Lake District. It says that fella from Hartlepool was speaking the truth. I could take you to a place in Rotherham. It isn't safe to walk around the streets at any time of the day. It's been taken over. The police will not go near it. James Bealby should go and see it for himself. And thank you to John in Gloucester, who says, earlier on, Peter, you made a distinction between decent law-abiding Muslims who are integrated into British society and Islamists who want to destroy our country and society. However, decent Muslims are standing by while their extremist co-religionists are growing in power, influence and number, particularly among young Muslim populations, driven by immigration from countries where these extreme views are the norm. If Muslims in general want to uphold British values and way of life, they need to do more to stop the frightening rise in Islamism in this country. Non-Muslims have no influence or ability to tackle this. In Christian countries, which previously had quite strict laws around abortion and marriage, for example, democracy allowed people to vote for change and progress. Most Muslim countries don't allow this. Muslims living in the UK need to realise that they have freedom and rights, but also responsibility to stand against the cancer of Islamism and squash it. Well, thank you for all those thoughts. Plenty more opinions coming your way in the next few minutes here on Talk.
The problem is these refreshes, all you do is you store up problems on the back benches, because you sack somebody, they go on the back bench and get people around them who are unhappy, and they become a focal point for dissent. So he'll be trying to avoid that. But there are all these different factions. You've got Wes Streeting, who sees himself as a sort of Blairite, and then you've got the left, who are all behind Angela Rayner. So you've got these different factions. He's got to try and he's got to tiptoe through this very carefully.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Let's hear a voice note from JB, who has got in touch with us. You can send your voice notes in 0344 499 1000. Send them in through WhatsApp. This is what JB has to say.
Everybody thinks if we go to war, it's going to be firing missiles far away. What people either don't or choose not to recognise is that the armies are being built up on our own shores by the influx of all these military-age men. When we do go to war, we will be fighting in our own land, and we will be outnumbered.
Well, thank you very much for that, JB. Appreciate your thoughts. Julie's been in touch as well, 0344 499 1000. Julie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, Peter. Thank you for taking my call. I usually just listen to you, but I took umbrage today with one of your commentators espousing money spent on illegal migrant children. My son is an adult social worker in child safeguarding and has to deal with these so-called children, many of whom turn out to be adults, many of whom have been placed in foster care or in children's homes, and they're 25, 26, 27.
And they're pretending to be children.
and pretending to be children, and nobody. I'm sorry, I'm going to raise down the challenge for you under an FOI to ask how many of the illegal migrants who enter the country claim that they're children.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage are proven to be not children?
Yeah.
And what percentage you can't prove because you're not allowed to check their teeth?
Well, you're absolutely right, Julie. And what Labour have done as well is phased out some of the things like facial recognition technology that the Conservatives proposed using.
Absolutely. And so in my own son's case, they have to rely on checking their Facebook. If they could you could do a swab test to check their DNA to say where they actually are from. And that amount of money and his time spent investigating these people who are not children detracts from him safeguarding children in this country who are in children's homes. He works with them from negligent parents and the support that he needs to give, and it's wasted. And when you ask border force, I mean, there's this nonsense from border force believe that a social worker is entitled to school an illegal migrant claiming to be a child who is not a child back down to London. And as you point out, they have no power. Social workers' powers were stripped out in the 1989 Act. They have no power to detain. And one of the cases they had, the person was also pretending to be a girl and was placed in a girl's home.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was a man. I'm sorry. And that's what he said. So those girls, and they then had to go and interview all the girls to ascertain nothing untoward.
Yeah, of course.
Had happened to these. But these girls were already vulnerable. These are British girls already vulnerable.
What a farce. What an absolute farce the system is. And sorry, Julie, at the very start you said, is it your son who's the social worker?
Yes, he's,
So I know a tiny, tiny bit about the care system because I mentor this dude who's in the care system. He's now 20, but I've mentored him since he was 13. Generally see him try to see him about once a month. And Julie, there are a lot of social workers who do a really good job, because social workers get criticised all the time. Oh, you missed this, you missed that. There are social workers who do a really tough job. They don't get paid a lot of money. They're in a situation where they're dealing, as you're talking about your son, really, really tricky situations. And I'm sure he feels powerless in those situations, and you do too.
He came home once where, and he fell into his father's arms crying over the abuse that he'd seen. Regarding 2 children, and all we could do was just hold him. As a young man, and these people, they're highly trained. They have to go through a rigour that you do not know, and they've been disempowered by government. Trust me. The 1989 Children Act needs to be totally redressed. But they want something like £32,000 a year. And you've got children's lives in their hands. Then
they're being paid less than the average wage, which is £36,000 a year. Julie,
and then they're dealing with illegal migrants.
Julie, can you just say to your son, thank you for the job he's doing from me and from our viewers and listeners, because it's a tough job. It is a really tough job, and there's a lot that's going wrong. Thank you for shining a light on that and telling us the truth about what's happening, Julie. I really appreciate the phone call, and it just makes me think about the migration system. It is just such a farce. There's so many farcical things that Julie is talking about. There's so many people who work so hard, who put so much money into the system. We're talking about tax today as well. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, was talking about that as well. She says, oh, taxes might go up, they might not. Chris Philp, who we talked to earlier, says they will go up. Well, listen, under the government he was part of, they went up to the highest level since the Second World War. And migration is a big, big issue. And there's so many people who are getting up in the morning, working 9 to 5, or even working right now on a Sunday, working overnight, doing shifts, keeping the country moving, but they're paying so much tax, and so much of it is going into giving money and subsidising people who shouldn't be here in the first place. Julie's just told us about people lying, saying that they're children, for example, to get extra privileges and extra accommodation and to be fast-tracked. A man, she said, who said he was a woman and was put into a girls' home. That is so concerning, so worrying. Why can't the government get a grip? Why can't they just realise that we're not going to take any more of this? One in, one out just seems to me to be not the worst idea I've ever heard, but nonetheless a drop in the ocean of the people who are coming over. 1 in 17 would be affected by this. Okay, it's a pilot scheme, but even if it got to 100%, the numbers of people coming down isn't going to change because it's 1 in, 1 out. That's what the scheme says. Why can't we do what Germany does? Why can't we do what Australia has done, for example? I'll tell you the reason, and it was actually made very, very clear by James Nation, who is Rishi Sunak's head of policy, who was on the debate desk panel yesterday. It's political will. It's saying to the judges, actually stop doing what you're doing, we're going to change the law, or we're going to take away some of your powers. It's toughening things up. It's having the strength that is needed. Someone like Norman Tebbit, who died this week, for example, would have that strength. We're going to talk about him a little bit later on from a fascinating perspective you're going to want to listen to. It's a really interesting one and coming up in about an hour's time. But lots more to discuss. In the meantime, I want to take a call from Mike from Stoke-on-Trent on migration and ID cards. Mike, this idea, I should say this is Yvette Cooper, story in the Sun today, talking about immigration. Immigrants will carry ID cards under plans. Digital document will prove their right to live and work and be uploaded to their holders' phones. Mike, what do you think of that idea? Mike, are you with us? Mike from Stoke-on-Trent? No, he's not. He's not with us, so we'll never know what he thinks. Well, maybe he'll come back in a minute or two. We'll maybe give him a ring back. National insurance cards originally were supposed to identify those that were allowed to work and those who aren't, but it was dished out to everyone, including migrants. Digital ID, while it sounds attractive in first principles, in hands of the left will be dished out to everyone or be declared racist, but the Democrats did in some states. That's actually not a bad idea in terms of saying, well, hold on a second. I mean, I'm kind of against ID cards and digital ID in general, because I'm worried about, I just don't trust the state with all our information. But then again, many people say they have it anyway. What are you worried about? But what about giving ID cards to people who are legally here in the country? And if you don't have one, well, maybe that just means people do fake ones. Maybe they're going to do that anyway. Mike, I gather you're with us now. Mike in Stoke-on-Trent? Hello, Mike? No, we just don't have Mike. We're not destined to speak to him today. David says they have been trying to smash the gangs for 60 years. How's that working out for them? Steve says a great way to save in the NHS, exempt any treatment caused by drugs, alcohol and smoking. 3 things the government want to clamp down on, and by doing this may help people stop participating in those habits. It may make people stop and think. Steve, I disagree with you. And here's why. There are a lot of people who started smoking when it was fashionable and when we didn't know the health benefits. It's an addictive thing. Should they stop? Of course they should stop. One of the best days of my life wasn't, getting into Oxford University. It was when my dad stopped smoking. That was amazing. I thought, great, he's going to live longer. He's hopefully not going to get lung cancer. He's hopefully going to live a long and healthy life, and he's alive and with us and hopefully will be for many, many years to come. Alcohol as well. I mean, I do think the NHS should be free at the point of use. And then if you extend that logic, well, what about people who are in ski accidents, for example? Skiing is something which is highly risky. If you break your leg, should you get it on the NHS? What about people who are in car accidents? What about people who come in and say, well, she drove into the back of me. No, it was your fault. You slammed on the brakes. You can't do that. You've just got to say if someone needs healthcare, they should get it. But actually, we're talking a little bit later on about Ozempic, and this is something that I think is a really, really big issue. Should that be on the NHS? Because if you are someone who is highly, if you're really, really overweight and you need to lose weight quickly because it's a big health problem, is that something that you should get on the NHS? And what about people who are just a bit overweight, maybe 2 or 3 stone overweight? I perhaps should declare my interest in that regard. Should I be getting Ozempic on the NHS? I don't think so. I've no desire to take it, I must say. And I mean, I'm in a fortunate position that I could afford it, but is that something that people should do, especially if you're only a couple of stone overweight? Maybe you should just have a bit of willpower and stop eating the Jaffa cakes, I say, as I'm about to have a custard cream that Tech Up Dave has given me in the break. We're going to talk about this in just a second with the founder of All Out Obesity and a nutritionist and health coach on both sides of the argument. We're going to get all the perspectives. I want yours as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who says, "Morning, Peter. Under Labour, illegal immigrants are clearly given preferential treatment. I find it most disconcerting to learn those living in housing associations or local authority housing might be facing compulsory eviction and their homes given over to interlopers who have no interest in assimilation into an orderly society. The Labour Party are not for ordinary people, and it's time we got rid of it at every legitimate opportunity," says Tad. Another person says British Indigenous people are now on their own. We've been abandoned by the government and the police. British people are now painted as the bad guys purely for wanting safe streets, safe towns away from immigrants. British adults need to stand up and prepare themselves, says Just Me on Twitter. And Bertie says, "Gotta laugh at Chris Philp now wants to get tough on illegal immigration and lower taxation. Why didn't they do it when in power? You can't trust a Tory," says Bertie on Twitter. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. We'll read out more of your messages, take more of your calls as time goes on. Loads of time between now and 1 o'clock to get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the mechanism to do so. Lift up the phone and let me know your thoughts. I want to talk now about Ozempic and all these fat jabs, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people saying just inject yourself with this, everything will be fine. We've seen various celebrities. I don't know if you've seen Simon Cowell's face. It doesn't look, in nature, it's not great. Ozempic face, people losing huge amounts of weight. People in, for example, clinics dealing with things like anorexia who are on Ozempic. I heard there was one clinic recently where 60% of people who have anorexia were on Ozempic, and similar jabs. It's not just Ozempic, it's lots of other jabs as well. I want to talk about this with Sarah LeBrock, who's the founder of All Out Obesity, and Marcel Rose, who's a nutritionist and health coach. I just want both your perspectives, Sarah and Marcel, both very, very welcome to the programme, about these fat jabs, because I think people see often people who are maybe not clinically obese, maybe not people who are, hugely overweight. If you are if I, for example, I'm 17 stone, if I was 24 stone, for example, I might be prescribed Ozempic. At the moment, I'm a couple of stone overweight, maybe 3 stone overweight. Have I thought about it? Yeah, of course I have. Have I said, a couple of £100 a month, maybe I could be thin and beautiful? Yeah, and loads of people think that way. I'm really interested from your perspective as experts, what your thoughts are on this. Sarah first, then Marcel, please. Sarah.
Yeah, so the weight loss medications, in my eyes, have been like a revolution for people living with obesity, because up until recently, we have not had any treatment options available for people living with the chronic condition of obesity. And I talk about it as a chronic condition because it is. And we know that obesity at the moment is deemed as someone with a BMI over 30. And these medications are prescription-only medicines available for people that fit that criteria. What we know is that lots of people are taking these medications that don't fit that criteria. And one of the things I kind of talk about at the moment with my friends and family and people that are talking about these medications going, "Oh, should I go on them?" And I'm like, if you didn't have diabetes, would you take insulin?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. So if you don't live with obesity, why on earth would you be considering taking a prescription-only medicine for it? You just shouldn't be. But I think because
But just shouldn't be is fine. And, insulin, you're not going to take it probably anyway because it's not going to make you thin. But if you simply say to someone quite straightforwardly, Sarah, inject yourself with this, you will be thin. People, despite some of the worries about the health problems, despite the fact that there are major issues and we still don't know a lot of the detail about this, they're going to say yes, aren't they? Because not everybody, but a heck of a lot of people want to be thin.
Yeah, well, but it's because of the societal drive to make us look a certain way. And if we don't look a certain way, we're treated very differently. I live with obesity myself, and I know this from weight stigma is everywhere. And it's this pressure to look a certain way. And I think that's the bit we need to change, is that we need to stop making people feel like they have to look a certain way. We need to focus on health. If people's health is okay, does it matter what body shape and size they come in? And the answer is no. So I think we need to change that societal messaging, because at the moment, like you're saying, people living with anorexia are taking these medications because they see it as a way of being able to control their anorexia. This should not be, they shouldn't be able to access these medications. Okay. They're prescription-only medicines. This is what it concerns me, is that, there's a black market going on. There's people getting access to these medications that shouldn't. And it's concerning for sure.
Marcel, you are a nutritionist and health coach. Tell us your perspective on this.
Yeah, so I actually specialise in working with people with eating disorders and disordered eating. So I'm seeing a lot of people who have either coming to me having got hold of this weight loss jab, having not needed it, and they're in a worse position. I'm also working with people who are currently on the weight loss jab, but they actually need more support than just thinking about the weight loss jab. But what concerns me is really about the fact that I think for a lot of people, they're not necessarily being able to make informed decisions around this. There are lots of issues with this medication that I think, there's been a massive media frenzy around it, and I think people are sort of jumping on it without considering the issues. One of the issues is that as soon as you discontinue the jab, you have the rebound weight gain, but you also have the rebound food noise and the cravings. People also experience muscle loss. So you've got to be doing other things around. If you are taking these medications, it's not enough to just reduce everything that you're eating. The other issue that I'm beginning to see and that there is concern about is the malnutrition, because what the weight loss medications do is suppress the appetite. So I'm seeing people who are just significantly reducing their food intake, but not necessarily changing what they're eating. And the problem is we start to see issues with nutrient deficiencies and malnutrition, and that can lead to all sorts of other issues. So for me, I'm concerned about the health of people.
What about the safety of the jabs themselves, Marcel?
So the other issue is there are many side effects. Some are ranging from sort of mild side effects, gastrointestinal, but some go to stomach paralysis, gallbladder disease, pancreatitis, an increased risk of a few different cancers at the moment. We're beginning to see problems related to a rare eye disease and more. So it's such short-term time that we've had data on this. We don't have long-term data. And a lot of people are now saying, well, okay, if there's rebound weight gain, then I need to stay on this for life. But we don't have the data of staying on these medications for life. And I just think that people need to make that risk analysis and be aware of all the issues involved with it.
If you are overweight, Sarah, your health is compromised, you're a candidate for diabetes, stroke, heart disease, cancer, arthritis, of course resulting from your joints being under strain. There are many ways in which you can persuade people and talk about being overweight without necessarily resorting to fat jabs.
No, absolutely. And I think you talked about at the beginning when you were doing your introduction, there's going to be people with different levels of, living with overweight or obesity and the impact that it has on your body. What these medications have been designed for are people living with the chronic condition of obesity. And when I say chronic condition, this is where your health is being impaired by your weight. And so it's for people like that these medications are a huge step forward and a huge advancement in care. And, Marcel was mentioning around that we haven't got long-term data. We actually have got long-term data around the molecule itself of semaglutide and liraglutide, which are the GLP-1 kind of elements of the medication.
So just not to blind people with information, those are the sort of active ingredients in Ozempic and fat jabs like it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they're the active group. They've been around for about 15 years for people living with diabetes. So we've got data on the lower doses in diabetes. What we don't have is the data around some of the higher doses, which we're using in obesity. So we can take some comfort in knowing we've got, a good 10, 15 years worth of data generally around this class. So it's not a new class of medication. It has been around for a while. So I think with all medication, it's about benefits outweighing risk. But I think when you live with obesity and it's impairing your health, so you might have high blood pressure, sleep apnea, high cholesterol, if this can actually reduce some of those symptoms down by losing weight as a result of being on the medication, then that's a real positive step forward for that person's health. So I think we need to look at everyone as an individual. I totally agree about the wraparound care needed. So the nutritional support, about moving more, about strength kind of exercises, etc. And also focusing around how someone feels as well, because that's important and we don't do that enough. So it is a case of not just jabbing yourself and hoping that's going to be everything. And we do know that when you come off the medication, your weight will regain. But if you came off a blood pressure medication, your blood pressure would go up. This is a chronic condition.
Marcel, Marcel, you must be worried about the black market and all of this. I mean, it's dead easy to get this prescribed in some way by an internet doctor. It's dead easy to get this sent to your home, for example. That must be something you're worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I said, I'm having people admit that they've done whatever they can because to get hold of these medications, because people with body image issues and history of disordered eating or eating disorders will do whatever they can to lose weight. And I completely understand the seductive nature of this for people who really don't have a need for these medications. As Sarah said, there's a huge amount of stigma in our society, and people feel that they need to strive for thinness no matter the harms and risks.
But of course, I mean, there are risks of being overweight. That is a risk. That is a risk to your health, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm talking about people who are getting hold of it, who are not necessarily medically in need of it, it becomes a feature of disordered eating and eating disorders, and we're beginning to see. I think it's going to be a huge problem. So I think I'm totally in agreement around the stigmatization of people in larger bodies. I work with a lot of people who struggle with binge eating, for example, many of whom are in large bodies and struggle with obesity. But I think that there are other ways we need to really address, rather than going straight for the jab, and giving people the support that they need. And there's other things, for example, that have come up in the news recently about trying to make healthier food options more accessible, because for some people it's food poverty is part of the obesity picture. It's multifaceted, it's social, physical and psychological, and we need to take all of these things into account.
Okay, final word from Sarah, please.
Yeah, I think what I would say is I don't think we should see these medications as a negative thing. I think what we need to put more pressure on is the right people being able to access these medications. And when I say right people, it's the people that actually physically and mentally need to have access these to improve their health. Yeah. And I think that's the bit we need to focus on, is ensuring that those regulations are tighter and that people can't access this that shouldn't be able to.
Okay, Sarah LeBlanc, founder of All Out Obesity, and Marcel Rosen, nutritionist and health coach. Thank you both for joining me on Talk today. We will talk more about this in just a few minutes. Stay with us here on Talk.
The problem is these refreshes, all you do is you store up problems on the back benches, because you sack somebody, they go on the back bench and get people around them who are unhappy, and they become a focal point for dissent. So he'll be trying to avoid that. But there are all these different factions. You've got Wes Streeting, who sees himself as a sort of Blairite, and then you've got the left, who are all behind Angela Rayner. So you've got these different factions. He's got to try and he's got to tiptoe through this very carefully.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. Mary has given me a ring from Cyprus, 0344 499 1000. Mary, what would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Well, you've been talking about the obesity jabs, and the lady, I didn't catch her name, who was in red, was quite correct, because people are having these jabs losing weight but not eating nutritionally. If you go to a slimming club like Slimming World or Weight Watchers, for example, they teach you what food to eat, which is good, healthy stuff, and you still lose weight. Now, I personally did one of those and lost 4 stone. I have a friend who's lost 9 stone.
9 stone, wow.
9 stone. Well, actually, another very good friend of mine has lost nearly 20.
Goodness me, 20 stone. Well, where were they originally?
Well, I don't know.
But quite a high weight, obviously.
Well, yes, she was a very large lady.
Yes,
who could hardly walk to her front gate.
Right.
But she, with difficulty, has lost all that weight. And another lady I know has lost 9 stone. And you see, when these people lose the weight, most of the time you're able to keep it off within 2 or 3 pounds or half a stone. Because you can go every week and get advice if you've put on weight or if you've found...
But a lot of people, Mary, just don't want that level of commitment. They just want to be able to put in the jab and, you know, society's rush to easy solutions. There's a pill for that, there's a jab for that, sort it out, and I don't have to take any personal responsibility.
Well, that's what's happening. But you see, of course, in my opinion, as soon as they stop the jab, because they haven't learned to eat what I would call good, nutritional, healthy food, they put the weight back on.
Well, it's true, and it is a vicious and indeed, in some ways, visceral cycle. Mary, thanks for your thoughts on that. Daniel is in Epsom and has some thoughts on weight loss jabs. Daniel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Pete, hi, great show. I mean, I lost 4 stone. I did Manjaro for about 5 months.
Okay, so that's one of these fat jabs, yeah.
Yeah, and I also sort of cut my carbs and sugar intake right down all the way through. I lost 4 stone. I went from 16.6 to 12.6.
Okay.
And I've kept the weight off for the last.
And how have you kept it off?
I've kept it off because I think one of the things that they're not wonder drugs, right? They're just appetite suppressants. That's all they really are. And I think what they do mentally is they make it they show you that most people eat too much. It becomes quite clear once you've been on them that it becomes apparent and obvious that you know most people eat too much, and you can see that. It's quite simple. You know, they're not so much wonder drugs, it's just very good appetite suppressants. And that's the way. And
do you worry about the side effects? Do you worry about, did you have side effects?
I didn't really have any. I mean, I had a little bit of the odd dodgy tummy from time to time, but now I'm at a park with my kids. You know, I no longer worry about going swimming on holiday. I look good. You know, I just think it's, you know, I was going to lose weight anyway, but it just helped me along the way. And
there's so many worries that people talk about, things we don't yet know about these jabs and about these issues. And I just wonder, from your perspective, did you get it from a GP or did you get it online? Or I'm not judging you, Daniel, by the way. I'm just wondering where you got it.
Yeah, I got it online. I got it myself through like an online pharmacy. But I was ahead of the curve. I kind of did this before it was kind of in the press and the news all the time. I just did it off my own back. And yeah, it's panned out really well. I've managed to keep the weight off and it sort of changed my life a little bit, really. And so the lady just said, oh, you put the weight back on. You do if you go back to eating like a pig, yeah. But if you're kind of, it also mentally, it helps you kind of think, well, did I need to be eating like that? You know, it's quite illustrative. It shows you what you need to do to keep the weight off. So I just think it works. And Peter, you've got to keep talking about the boat, stopping the boats and the crisis. Because
we will, Daniel. Don't you worry about that.
I can tell you now, Peter, that there's a correction coming. There's a tidal wave of people that are unhappy with this country. It's not just about one in, one out. We want the 1.5 million that are here gone. Okay. We want them deported. And if we don't get what we want, there's going to be some form of uprising. I'm sick of it, Peter.
I know a lot of people share that frustration, Daniel. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And certainly we wouldn't condone any form of violence or illegality, certainly. But people do need to make their voice heard. One of the ways you can do that is by giving us a ring here at Talk 0344 499 1000. And actually, on that migration issue and on the ID cards issue, Tom was giving me a ring from Stockton-on-Tees. Tom, you're very welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Peter. Nice to talk to you.
Hiya.
I think most people in this country have seen mobile phone footage taken by migrants within the small boats of them discarding their identification documents into the English Channel, thus consequently arriving in the UK with absolutely no form of ID at all. How on earth can you issue someone who you don't know who they are, you don't know their date of birth, you don't know their country of origin, with an ID card? It's a complete nonsense.
It's also the fact that, you know, these ID cards, if they then entitle you to certain things, they're going to be copied, they're going to be forged, aren't they?
Of course they are. And if the political class can't see that, then they're either wishing to ignore it or they just don't know what they're doing. I would suggest the latter.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, listen, thanks for your points on that. Really appreciate that. Many people getting in touch on this issue of migration. Thank you to William, who says, just regarding immigration, there is one deterrent, and the deterrent is that no illegal immigrant will ever qualify for benefits. Surely that would stop them coming in. And William says he's very irritated. He lives in Horley. Gary says, your guest earlier on said there's no one deterrent to the illegal boat crossings, but there is. Macron agrees to take back every immigrant who comes here illegally on the next ferry. The boats would stop coming because what would be the point, and the people traffickers' business model wouldn't have been smashed. Can he or anybody else explain why that wouldn't work? David says, I don't believe the illegal migrants are risking their lives crossing the channel. John says, when all the deals, agreements, legislation and policies fail to stop the invasion from small boats, what would be your solution to stopping it once and for all? I know what my solution would be. Rob says, one in, one out isn't a pilot, as it's not a scheme, as there isn't a plan. It really should be called the CIV policy. There's so many holes in it, he says. Quite a lot on weight loss as well. Carol's been in touch and says, weight loss medication has transformed my life. I have been miserable for years and became socially isolated because of my unhappiness. I pay for it myself. It isn't a magic pill. You have to follow a healthy diet and exercise. I feel so much healthier as well. Paul in Weymouth says, a lot of mumbo jumbo pseudo-scientific talk around obesity. It's easy. Eat less and move more. Thank you to another texter who says, people bragging about dropping inches and wearing smaller sizes, but muscle loss is a ticking time bomb for fragility and later life. The speed and scale of weight loss on these jabs mask the fact that people lose a huge amount of muscle, and it's almost impossible to rebuild muscle, particularly in middle age. Stephen is in Kent and has given me a ring about this. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about weight loss? Stephen, are you there? Oh, we have another caller who's disappeared. We'll talk about weight loss with someone else in a minute, but let's talk about immigration first with Sarah from the Isle of Wight. Sarah, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Good to talk to you. Love the programme.
Thank you.
Love Talk Radio. I just felt I must call in. I am a layperson. I'm a mother. I live on the Isle of Wight. I'd like to talk about immigration. I think it's quite interesting that we're celebrating 40 years of Live Aid.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're, in my opinion, no further forward in terms of the world, the economy, and us as people on the ground working hard, really understanding who's making decisions across the world about tax, economics, welfare. So let me just give you a scenario.
Well, just before you do, Sarah, I agree with what you're saying there, and I think that, you know, people want to feel as if they're making a difference by donating to things like Live Aid and Comic Relief and Children in Need and so on, and I just wonder whether they actually do. There are many schemes, of course, that have helped many, many people over the years, but you're not going to solve the problem overall, especially when in many governments are just corrupt and just don't deal with these situations correctly in those developing nations.
I'd love Bob Geldof to ring in and really share with us what I know the answer is why he stopped.
Yeah.
Why he really got disenfranchised with government around the tax, around donations and the apportionment of that. And in terms of, you know, on the ground, I live in the Isle of Wight. I've got teenage daughters and also got friends that have got children in obviously school. And we have a number of people that have been, in the nicest way, parachuted into our society.
Yeah.
We don't know who they are. And honestly, every day there are males gathering around playgrounds, smoking, filming and looking at young girls. And it is a massive problem. So,
and what happens? I mean, presumably you've called the police to say they shouldn't be doing this.
Yes.
And what do they do, if anything?
Well, it kind of all goes very quiet. For me, it's not about what's right or wrong, it's what's right for our society.
Of course.
And that is not acceptable in the British society, that young males congregate around school-age children exercising in gym gear, filming them, and having conversations around them. And this is, for me, a massive problem. We've got this in the Isle of Wight. Well, we all know where the Isle of Wight is.
Yes.
And so, for me, it's not about allowing people to come and live here. It's who are they?
Yeah.
What do we
and do they share British values? Are they going to obey the law? Are they going to be sanctioned or caught if they don't obey the law, Sarah? And it sounds to me as if these people are not obeying the law, or at least are doing things that are making people feel very, very uncomfortable. If there was an Indigenous person from the Isle of Wight who was filming children in a playground, I am fairly sure lots of people wouldn't put up with that, and I'm not sure the police would put up with that either. And I do wonder about this.
Well, I have friends, 2 males, that have children that they've adopted, and they're having enormous problems in a street in London where they live, where they're spat at, they're sworn at, because in that area of London, East London, it is predominantly a certain demographic.
So you're talking? Are you talking about 2 gay men who've adopted children?
I am.
Yeah.
And they are British white males. One of them is Jewish, and they are marginalised.
That's dreadful.
They are persecuted in their own country by the demographic that are first, second generation British people.
Well, that's appalling, and I'm so sorry to hear that. And Sarah, can you just tell your 2 friends that they're doing a brilliant thing by adopting children? There are 80,000 children in the care system in this country. They all need loving homes. Your friends are providing one, and they shouldn't have any form of discrimination against them whatsoever for any reason. They're doing a really good thing. Sarah, we've got to leave it there because we're going to the 12 o'clock news. But listen, thank you for your call. Please give me a ring on another occasion. That's Sarah in the Isle of Wight there. Plenty more to come. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company and your comments. Loads of people getting in touch. There's lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. What I'm going to talk about in a second is this big report coming on Tuesday about anti-Semitism rife among the middle classes. This is Lord Mann and Penny Mordaunt, John Mann and Penny Mordaunt, one Labour, one Conservative politician, talking about this. They have written today, we heard about the noisy demonstrations and how intimidating people find the current environment, but as we dug deeper, what really scared us was the increasing normalisation of anti-Semitism. We'll talk more about that in just a second. We're also going to talk to someone who has a unique perspective on Norman Tebbit, who died this week. Lots to talk about as well, about migration, about ID cards for migrants, and people ringing in about weight loss drugs as well. If you have thoughts on that, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, and we're asking the question, how is Starmer going to solve the migrant crisis? Stay with us here on Talk. Well, just on migration, Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, has been out and about this morning. She spoke to Sky News about the one-in, one-out policy that Keir Starmer agreed with Emmanuel Macron this week. This is what she told Sky News a little bit earlier on today.
We believe that we've got a robust, workable deal with President Macron. It's a deal that the previous government weren't able to negotiate. And I think this is ultimately the way in which we break the model of these international people smuggling gangs that are operating in multiple jurisdictions across Europe. We have to be making prosecutions. We're doing that not just in England and Wales, but in France and Germany. I get all of that. But there's a matter. That is why we have to be working with President Macron and our allies in Europe to tackle this problem. We're not going to be able to do it on our own.
Lots to discuss on this, and we will do that before 1 o'clock. Derek says, send the immigrants to the Falkland Islands. Australia stopped immigration in 1 week. David in Worcestershire says, why can we not organise the dinghies ourselves and escort the migrants to French waters and let them take them from there? It cannot work only one way. Sean in Gloucester, I'm absolutely furious with the lefties that did their utmost to scupper any Brexit deal proposed and demanding it be overturned, are now blaming a bad Brexit for all of our problems. We need a total reset and an election now. And just a final one before we go to our next topic. Brian says, Starmer does not have the will to stop the boats. He is a human rights lawyer and a coward. The solution is easy and in our hands. Use the Navy to turn the boats around mid-channel and stop the freebies and benefits for those that do get here. It's not difficult. All that it takes is courage to act in the best interest and security of our country. Well, we're talking about the best interest and security of our country now in regard to anti-Semitism. There's a big report out on Tuesday by John Mann, Lord Mann. He is the government's anti-Semitism advisor. He's co-written it with Penny Mordaunt. Dean Penny Mordaunt is, of course, the former Defence Secretary. So one Conservative, one Labour, and they have said, they've written an article for the Sunday Telegraph today. So we heard about the noisy demonstrations and how intimidating people find the current environment. But as we dug deeper, what really scared us was the increasing normalisation of far more extreme, personalised and sometimes life-changing impact directed at individuals purely and simply because they are Jewish. We are two non-Jews from opposite sides of the political spectrum, and we have both come to realise that if our Jewish community is facing discrimination, that is a failure of our society. I couldn't agree more with them, and what they are recommending we'll hear more about on Tuesday. But it includes recognising Judaism as an ethnicity, an overhaul of the policing of anti-Semitic crime, and the launch of an anti-Semitism training qualification for employers. Well, I wonder what Stephen Silverman thinks about that. He's Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. In a second, we'll speak to the Chief Executive of Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, Danny Stone. Stephen, first of all, will this report make a difference? What do you make of the recommendations?
It's we've arrived at a destination that we feared we wouldn't reach, we might reach, but hoped that we wouldn't. It's no surprise. it's something that has been steadily mounting for almost 2 years. And if this report is merely something else for politicians and others in authority to go, so this is dreadful, and give us warm words with no substantive action, then it's not going to help change things. The main thing that needs to happen now is for the government, the criminal justice system, regulatory bodies, everyone from the NHS to universities to get a grip and understand that we are in the middle of a virus coursing through our society that can only end in misery for everyone if it isn't stopped.
The NHS is a particularly interesting aspect of this, and a particularly worrying one. Jewish doctors in the NHS reporting a surge in anti-Semitic abuse from colleagues since the 7th of October attacks, when Hamas terrorists, of course, killed many hundreds of Israelis. According to the General Medical Council, the independent body that recognises the UK Medical Register, several NHS staff have been reported for anti-Semitic activities, from workplace abuse to social media posts celebrating the 7th of October. The education sector also criticised for allowing the spread of anti-Semitism on university campuses and in primary schools. One campus where staff members whom Jewish students trust with their health records shouting for an intifada, the Arabic word that can be used to describe violent Palestinian uprisings against Israel. This is everywhere.
It is. It's in every walk of life. It seems there is no sphere that has been left untouched by this current outbreak of anti-Semitism at a level that we have not seen. I don't think any one of us in living memory have seen it. And this is the reason why Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has announced that there will be a march in central London on the 7th of September, where the Jewish community, and we hope so many of our friends and allies and others who understand that ultimately they will be the target of this level of extremism, we hope that they will join us and give us their support.
What time is it?
The details will be announced a little closer to the day, as will the start and end points. So
I'm on air from until 1 o'clock that day. If I can make it after the programme, Stephen, I'll come down and join you. This is really, really worrying. And you talk about concrete action, but it's about people calling this out as well. I've asked this question a number of times, but in the context of this report, what can ordinary people do? I mean, you're talking about concrete action from government, from society, from businesses and so on. But what about the fact that there are so many people who overhear this stuff and say nothing about it, who might not say it themselves, but hear criticism or tropes or stereotyping, and they don't say anything about it? What would you say to them if they're listening or watching today?
I think people have to understand that anti-Semitism is just another form of racism.
Yeah,
it's racism against Jews. It has a particular name because we use it because it operates in a different way to most forms of racism. Not that it's any worse. All forms of racism are abhorrent, but it is racism. And if people would not tolerate hearing racial abuse of any other ethnic group, then they should equally not tolerate any anti-Semitic abuse, and they should call it out when they see it.
Stephen, thank you. That's Stephen Silverman, who's Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Let's go to Danny Stone, MBE, who's the Chief Executive of Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. Danny, thanks for joining us today. Maybe I can ask you the same question. What do you make of this report, and are you shocked by anything in it? Do you think it'll make any difference?
Thanks, Peter. Well, I suppose I should declare an interest because our organisation helps Lord Mann run his office. So we are linked to the report, and to that end, I do think it will make a difference. But also anyone who knows John Mann will know that he's not someone who rests back and lets reports.
He's a total hero. He doesn't just sit there and do nothing, does he? I mean, this is the person who confronted. Who was it he confronted at 4 Millbank at the offices of and called him a racist? Who was that?
That was Ken Livingstone.
Ken Livingstone, that's right. I mean, that was really, really interesting and really brave as well. He's a very brave man.
It was, and John speaks out. So this report definitely won't be left on a shelf. I already know that one of the recommendations that they are making is being actioned, and there is direct action taking place in relation to engaging with the health service, for example. So it won't be left alone. But the report highlights how widespread this anti-Semitism is, as you've just been talking about. Any sector, engage with government, engage with NHS, engage with the third sector, you will find some anti-Semitism.
And it is everywhere. I mean, it is something that I've overheard. It's something I've challenged with people. There are tropes and stereotypes that happen. And I just wonder, I mean, I always wonder, and I never really, I suppose, get to the bottom of it, but is it just the ancient hatred? Is it the blood libel? What is it that makes people feel that they can say things about Jewish people that they would never say about gay people, about black people, about Muslims, about women? So much of that is completely verboten now, and there's so few people who would ever dream of saying those things, yet it seems fine to criticise Jewish people and to blame all Jewish people, for example, for the actions of the Israeli army or whatever.
Yeah, you're quite right. And, you know, it's what prompted David Baddiel to write his book, Jews Don't Count, the idea that racism against Jews doesn't feature or isn't contemplated or addressed in the same way that other forms of racism are. Now, the kind of the world events as we stand, the kind of economies and politics lends itself to anti-Semitism. People are worried, people are unsure about their future, and they look to conspiracy for comfort. So a small group of people out there that supposedly are doing things to hurt them. And at the heart of most conspiracies, you will find allegations of Jewish control. And there's this cultural reservoir of anti-Semitism that's so easily accessible. So it is something that people just tend to grasp onto and run with.
Danny, great to talk to you. Let's hope this report does make a difference. That's Danny Stone there, MBE, who's the Chief Executive of Anti-Semitism, of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. No doubt we'll hear more about this. This big report out on Tuesday. Lord Mann, I'm sure, will be speaking to us at some stage, maybe Penny Mordaunt as well. I certainly hope so. I'm sure we will hear from them on Tuesday across the media. Paul's in Bolton and has given me a ring about this. 0344 499 1000. Paul, what's your perspective on this?
Hiya, Peter. Basically, I just, I class myself as working class. I live in Bolton West, but I do mix with people in Manchester and that. And this topic of anti-Semitism, it never comes up in general life. It's almost like it's just the media and politicians.
Maybe it doesn't come up in your life, Paul, but I can tell you it's come up in my life. And if you look at the pro-Palestinian marches, there's a lot of anti-Semitism there.
But what I'm saying is I live quite a general life. I go to Manchester, I go to different places within Greater Manchester, and no one's talking negatively about Jewish people.
Well, I'm delighted that's your experience, but that's not been the experience of many, many hundreds of thousands of people.
But with no disrespect here, I hear a lot more. I'm part of the LGBT plus community, and I hear a lot more anti-LGBT plus sentiment than I do anti-Jewish sentiment. And with no disrespect to you, I never hear you ever call out anti-LGBT plus sentiment. But I'm always.
I don't think you've been listening to my. I don't think you've been listening to my shows perhaps closely enough. It's something that I'm not happy with. I don't think it should happen, and certainly when it comes to gay rights, I've been on Pride marches. I've been in Pride March in London, been in Pride March in Belfast. I actually organised a group to go on a Pride March in Belfast, for example. I've loads of gay friends. I have lots of people who I know who are bisexual or whatever. It's something, you know, I feel strongly about, and I want to make sure that people aren't discriminated against. So I hope you're not discriminated against, Paul, and if people say things against you, they shouldn't do that. And there are very strong laws to protect you and people like you.
Well, yeah, but like I say, you're dismissing me saying about the...
I'm not dismissing you, I'm just saying that lots of people have had that experience.
Well, I actually would go as far as to agree. I mean, I don't get involved in all this Israel-Palestine row like a lot of people do, and I'm quite a political person, but I just stay out of it. But unless the person's an Orthodox Jewish person, people aren't really going to know who's Jewish, but people will always pick on Muslim people because of the colour of their skin. So again, I'd say there's a lot more I don't know if it's anti-Muslim sentiment as such, but there's a lot more.
I think there's quite a lot of both, Paul. I think there's quite a lot of both that's happening, and just because it's not your experience doesn't mean it's not happening. But Paul, thanks for your perspective on that. Janine is in Middlesex and has some thoughts on the weight loss jab. Janine, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic due to pituitary adenoma, which means I've got a tumour in my brain which caused my diabetes. It totally shut down my pancreas. I am a larger lady. The pituitary adenoma runs in the family, which causes the diabetes. And I've always, since family members got diabetes, tried to follow a diabetic diet. But I've now seen 4 consultants who are very keen to put me on the weight loss jab.
Right. And how do you feel about that yourself? Do you think that's a good idea?
No, I was not very keen because I read the medical reports on with the side effects in the BNF, in the Lancet, things like that, and I thought no. But they keep pushing it. But I just think, well, if I can lose the weight naturally, following my diabetic diet, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So in the last year, I've lost 20 kilos.
Well done. That's really good.
And my GP has actually put me forward to choose a weight loss plan with the NHS, and I chose Slimming World, and in 6 weeks I've lost 5 kilos.
Well done. That's brilliant. So it can be done without these jabs.
I just feel that if you have, but they think that because you're fat, you eat a lot, and you've got this food noise thing. I didn't know what food noise
What is food noise? What is that?
Well, I understand it's people who've got cravings all the time and things like that, and keep thinking about food morning, noon and night, whereas I don't get that. Unfortunately, my weight loss is... my weight gain is due to endocrine problems, hormonal problems, which run in the family. So I've always been aware that I can easily put on weight. But I just feel that if you've got this problem where you're excessively overweight and it's monitored by medical teams, that's okay. But and you've got certain other indicators. But I think they should give people a chance to lose weight naturally using one of these schemes, even if the GP nominates them for you.
How hard has that been?
Better and cheaper for the NHS.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you, Janine, how difficult has it been for you to actually push back against that medical advice and say, do you know what, I'm going to do it myself? If you've got 4 different doctors telling you to take the fat jabs.
I've literally said, please let me think about it. I want to do research.
Yeah.
And when I actually spoke to my GP about this on Friday, and she said, if you're losing weight naturally, I'd rather you do that than have the jabs.
Yes.
And that's my own GP saying it. She said, well done for losing the weight. Yeah. Keep up the good work.
You lost 25 kilograms. That is very substantial. Have you much more to go, Janine? Is there a longer way to go?
Yes, I have got a long way to go.
Okay.
But it's not the heaviest I've ever been.
Yes.
My weight went back on during the pandemic because I was in the shielding group and I wasn't able to leave the house for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I didn't get out to, not even for the 15 minutes, 20 minutes of exercise.
Yeah. Well, yet another effective lockdown. Janine, thanks for sharing your story with us. Really appreciate that. Appreciate you getting in touch with us. We're going to talk more about this. Lots of people getting in touch about that and about migration as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is going to meet representatives from the British Medical Association this week in talks in an effort to avoid planned strike action that had been reported. Now it is confirmed, the breaking news, that the Health Secretary is going to meet representatives from the BMA to avoid the strike action. 29.2% is what the doctors want, on top of 22% they got earlier this year. Maybe if Wes Streeting, maybe if the Treasury, and maybe if Keir Starmer hadn't capitulated to their 22% rise, they wouldn't be coming back for more. Feed a crocodile, keeps coming back for more, as a wise woman once said. Lots more to discuss on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
The problem is, these refreshes, all you do is you store up problems on the back benches, because you sack somebody, they go on the back bench and get people around them who are unhappy, and they become a focal point for dissent. So he'll be trying to avoid that. But there are all these different factions. You've got Wes Streeting, who sees himself as a sort of Blairite, and then you've got the left, who are all behind Angela Rayner. So you've got these different factions. He's got to try and he's got to tiptoe through this very carefully.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to John, who says the police and courts are spineless. Anti-Semitism's already kneeled down under the Equalities Act, and like so many other issues in our country, they will not act. This is just another part of our nation's slow motion breakdown. Jason in the Lake District. Let's just call this what it is. Racism by a faith that is protected more than any other faith in the country. Nothing will get done. It will be more words expressing shock and shame, but because it will involve tackling Islamism, it will get brushed away again. Listen, I have absolutely no doubt that there are many, many Muslims who are very anti-Semitic. There are statistics that back that up. There are loads of other people from loads of other faiths as well who are anti-Semitic as well, and we need to tackle it from all sides. Another person says, I'll take your 17 stone and raise it, you lightweight. I wish I was lightweight. Another person says, the reason anti-Semitism is rife is quite simple. The demographic of the population in positions of authority, probably as a result of fanatical diversity hiring over the recent years, has shifted the conversation, and now they're already dictating opinion on a wide scale. Afternoon Peter says, Dave is a Falklands veteran, and having travelled back a few times, the islanders do not want the migrants, and why should their way of life be impacted, says Dave in Aberdeen. I think they've been through enough, Dave. I agree with you. Gary says, on digital ID, don't all British citizens have a national insurance number? Phil says the only way to stop the boats is to get the army to build secure Nightingale processing camps with basic accommodation and no Wi-Fi, as internet access is not a human right, where migrants stay under guard until they can prove who they are, to get their ID card if they're allowed to stay here. If they fail to get asylum, they stay in the camps until they ask to go to their country of origin. The boats would stop within a week or so. Stuart says, you must be honest and agree that Britain is in a dire straits and that no politically correct moderate politicians are going to be able to stop the rot. It needs someone strong and patriotic like President Trump. Darren in London says, how can you give ID cards to anyone who has no ID? And Matt in Manchester, Peter, on fatties, they need to stop lying around the gaff like lounge lizards and shut their pie holes when passing Greg's. Simples, says Matt in Manchester. Brutal, Matt, say I, who had a Greg's yesterday. Jeff has been in touch and with a voice note.
Morning, Peter. Jeff in Birmingham. This 50-50 scheme of our wonderful leader, when it goes belly up, it's his excuse. Well, I did try. I made a deal with Macron, but the EU blocked it. Absolute joke. What a waste of time and effort. Cheers, Peter.
Thanks, Jeff. Much appreciated. Richard's been in touch on migrants as well.
Good morning, Peter. It's Richard here from Crowborough. Just two things to really help with this migrant situation. Any basic application for any of the sundries and basics that they want must be either written or verbal, and if they claim to be from Syria and they can't speak Syrian, that tells you all you need to know. So to get it, they have to do verbal or written applications. And the second thing, basically, sure, they can have their legal representation, but all immigration matters regarding that have to be on a no-win, no-fee basis. And then we'll see just how sincerely these lawyers believe in these cases that they're dealing with. At the moment, it doesn't matter to them either way, does it? Good show, mate. All the best. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. Ian has some thoughts on this as well.
Hi, Peter. Ian, Essex. These smuggling gangs are not stupid. It's quite simple. Don't worry. Buy one, get one free. If you get brought back, we'll give you another go once you've returned. Simple. Haven't they figured this out?
Sue, you breached the minute limit by 3 seconds. Tech Up Dave is apoplectic, but nonetheless she made some very good points about a closer relationship with Macron. So here's what Sue has to say.
Peter, I don't know what's going on with your guest, James, saying that we need to have this really close relationship with Macron, who we've already given £771 million to, who could have built a processing centre with that, actually, in Calais, and done what he effectively said the Tories wouldn't let him do or whatever. Well, they've had £771 million. They could have built a processing centre. And one thing I'm going to say is we do have to stop the pull factor. But more than anything, Macron and France put them in tents. They've left them in tents for years. And you're telling me that we can't set up something here that is not tent orientated? But how has he got away with that all these years? How does he get away with that? And how does he get away with coming here and telling us that we're stupid because we voted for Brexit? He's just a nasty, nasty little man.
So you make some very, very good points. It was worth putting you on, even though it was 63 seconds rather than the 60-second limit. Tech Up Dave says he's going for a lie down after this to recover from all of that. But on a serious note, Sue, you make some really, really good points. Leslie's been in touch as well and says how appalling this report on anti-Semitism in our country in 2025. It must be dealt with. It's a stain on the UK. Well done you for willing to attend the march. I hope it isn't disrupted by the Palestinian mob, says Leslie. Yeah, I will go to that march if I can. It's after the show on the 7th of September. I'll get the details, of course, nearer the time, as Stephen Silverman said. Another person says, I don't buy the Home Office can't ID the migrants who ditch their documents in the sea. They will be ID'd when entering Europe. They'll no doubt be ID'd by the UN. It's just the government making excuses. Take away the civil service pension to fund migrants' hotels and they'd find the answer tomorrow. Ben in Manchester says, we can find out where anyone comes from. Even the migrants have their own digital footprints these days. Des in Worcestershire says, it certainly seems to me that either the Labour or Conservatives have any appetite at all. Neither the Labour or Conservatives have any appetite at all to stop illegal immigration. Jeff in Aberdeenshire says, what's the point of ID cards for migrants who throw away their ID? We've no idea who they are. Paul says, Border Force and the RNLI just need to rescue the illegals and save them by taking them back to France. That is Paul G in Dunoon. Sean in Gloucester says, wouldn't we get called racist if we ask someone that isn't white for their ID card and if they're only given to illegal immigrants? Sue in Nottinghamshire says, Peter, illegal immigrants, we simply need the government to do their job and protect our borders from individuals who don't belong here. That means checking IDs, validating entitlement to stay and restrain if basic checks are failed. Minimum expenditure, maximum security, deport. And Stuart says, I'm sure last week that Flip-Flop Starmer and his EU-loving pal Macron were discussing together just how horribly racist and right-wing the British and French people are. Let's hear from Daniel, who wants to know the difference between Islam and Islamism.
Hi Peter, Daniel in Caithness here. All right, so what's the difference between Islam and Islamism? Because I would say that the founders of Islam were certainly Islamists. So what you're requesting of good British Muslims is for them to not really follow the rules of Islam, right? That's the central problem. We can be moderate or whatever. Does moderate mean just not following the rules? Because if you look at the rules, then you're an Islamist if you follow them.
Daniel, I don't quite agree with what you're saying there, and I think that the problem with theology and the problem with the interpretation of any religion, including Islam, absolutely, and some of what you say I agree with, but also things like Catholicism, Christianity in general, Judaism, Sikhism, there are lots of things in there that we don't follow all the time. There are lots of cultural aspects, there are lots of things we just disagree with, for example, as a society. The classic example is, I think, and if you're a Christian and you disagree with me, that's fine, but I think the Bible is pretty clear on homosexuality. I think it is very clear that the Bible believes homosexuality is wrong. I think there's a lot in there that is just really straightforward, but culturally we have changed as a society, and that is something that a lot of, I know a lot of gay Christians who are gay and are nonetheless Christians. That's fine. I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm just saying that if you take a strict literal interpretation of the Bible, well, the two are not comparable in my view. And I think the same is true with Islam, the same is true with lots of religious texts. Islamism, to me, and you may still disagree with this, Daniel, and it's fine if you do, but Islamism to me is perverting what is in the Quran and is saying that violent jihad and saying that destroying a British way of life and a Western way of life is something that should be justified on religious grounds. Now, there are people who may say you could justify on religious grounds for other religions that they're the destruction of a society, but what the problem is that if you're acting in the nature and saying that that is because of what it says in the Quran or another religious text, well, that's of course related to that. So Islamism, to me, is more than that, it's perverting what true Muslims think. It's perverting what moderate and reasonable Muslims who, yes, profess their faith, yes, go to a mosque, but nonetheless uphold British values. It's a complicated argument. I'm not going to give you an answer you're going to be satisfied with in the 45 seconds or a minute that I'm talking to you about now, but it's not strictly what a true, pure version, a dogmatic version of Islam is. I'm not a religious scholar. I'm not a theological mind, but those are my opinions. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. We've got half an hour to disagree. We've got longer than that. I'm on other occasions, including Thursday and Friday and next weekend. So you can give me a ring anytime, 0344 499 1000. Let's hear 3 more voice notes before we go to the break. Judy first.
Hello, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. It's not rocket science what to do with all these people coming from other countries and illegal immigrants, etc., and getting benefits and God knows what. All they've to do is bring a law in that nobody can claim benefits or legal aid unless they've lived and worked in this country for 10 years. Just make that a law. And also, when they come over on the boats and the lorries, take them to secure army camps, which are guarded until it's all been sorted out who they are, what they're doing here, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Dawn has been in touch and says lots of callers are putting forward good ideas for dealing with illegal migration. Sadly, none of the ideas will be adopted by Star Miranda's acolytes. We are almost in a doom loop now. Henry has a voice note.
Hi Peter, great show. Henry from Suffolk. ID cards for immigrants only. How the hell does that work? So you get stopped by the authorities and say, I want to see your ID card. You say, well, I'm not an immigrant. So if that's not creating some sort of racial profiling, then I don't know what is. It's nuts.
Thank you, Henry. On obesity, Nikki's been in touch.
As regards to obesity and fat people, why are the British so fat? They are now top the table for being the most overweight people in Europe. You go to Spain and France and Italy, who have wonderful food, and you don't see people waddling about like you do in the United Kingdom. We ought to look at what is going wrong and what we're stuffing in our faces in the United Kingdom. Okay, it's Nikki from Kent in Italy.
Very good point, Nikki, and I think one of the answers, there are many answers to your question, but one of the answers is processed food. A Mediterranean diet does not involve processed food, doesn't involve the nonsense and the processed additives that you put in. So many of our European friends and neighbours have really simple diets and have lots of food, yes, but it's good food, and that is the difference. And the cheap availability of processed food, especially in this country and many other countries too, and in those countries as well, of course, but there are many people who just don't eat it. Rob has been in touch and says metabolism, appetite, lack of exercise, mobility and fat storage factors why you may put on weight. If you put the right food and in the right amount of food on your plate, you will be able to control your weight. If you don't, then you won't. The biggest question is, are they absolutely focused on losing weight and doing the hard work that entails, or do they just want to pop a pill, says Rob. It's a very, very good point. And Stephen Millings in Belfast, final one before the break, says, top tip, Peter, if you're having a quick custard cream during a short break, have a hot drink like tea to wash it down. A cool Diet Coke won't cut it. Fabulous show, says Stephen. I do have a cup of tea made for me by the assistant producer Tommy, who is a great man and has lots of posh tea bags from Fortnum & Mason, which is my favourite tea shop, it must be said. Stephen, you're a great man, even more so than a custard cream. I hear that a chocolate brownies are very good to have with your 11s, but nonetheless, we're talking about weight loss, so let's keep it to a healthy diet perhaps for the rest of the day. Haven't started well. Stay with us here on Talk. We're going to talk in just a second about Norman Tebbit and his legacy from a different angle, the one you won't perhaps expect. It's a really, really interesting one. We're going to talk to Rory Hanrahan in just a second.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Norman Tebbit died this week, the Conservative politician who embodied a sterner Britain. He was 94 years old. He was a Conservative cabinet minister. He was a right-hand man of Margaret Thatcher, scourge of Edward Heath, someone who said that his father got on his bike and got a job, and that was something that meant that Norman Tebbit was very, very well known. That phrase stayed with him. Sadly, what also made him very well known was that he and his wife Margaret were victims of the 1984 IRA Brighton bomb, which killed a number of people, including Sir Anthony Berry. It meant that Margaret Tebbit had lifelong injuries, and Norman Tebbit had to look after her as well as continuing his parliamentary career. Really interesting perspective on this is coming in just a second from Rory Hanrahan, who's going to be speaking to us. Rory is a pub landlord. He's written an article for The Spectator about this. He's talked about forgiveness and his father. So Rory's father was an IRA terrorist called Sean O'Callaghan, and Sean was a really interesting guy. I knew him quite well. He was the highest ranking informer in the history of the Irish state. Sean's no longer with us either. And despite the fact that Sean was involved in a couple of murders himself and indeed was sentenced to 539 years in prison, he nonetheless attempted redemption, became an informer, decided that he wanted to stop people being murdered and indeed save the lives of Charles and Diana, who were about to be bombed by the IRA at a theatre performance. That is something that Sean O'Callaghan prevented. He spent his life, the rest of his life after he got out of prison, and indeed beforehand as an informer, trying to atone for his sins. Rory has a really fascinating perspective on this. He's written for The Spectator this week about it. Rory himself is a writer for The Spectator and also a pub landlord. Rory, great to talk to you this morning, or this afternoon I should say. For those who haven't read your article, just talk us through a little bit about this complicated relationship your father and Norman Tebbit had and your perspective on it.
Sure. Hi Peter, how are you? I think Norman Tebbit had a fantastically successful column in the Sun newspaper, and he had a part of it where he used to do his Hero of the Week. And when Sean sort of outed himself as an informer, he was still in jail in Maghaberry, Norman Tebbit picked him as his Hero of the Week, which for a man whose wife was paralysed in a bomb, and he nearly died himself, and the sheer horror of that particular attack on the Conservative Party at Brighton was an extraordinary thing to do. And it certainly affected my father deeply. This tough man of Conservative politics, this sort of hero of the working class, a man who stood against the worst of sort of leftist entryism and communism, and had every reason to loathe and despise and hate the provisional IRA, yet was willing to reach out and form a relationship with a man who had killed people, he'd murdered people, which I just thought was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Sort of juxtaposition,
So it's given you a fascinating insight this week, and actually Norman Tebbit knew your father. They met on a few occasions, didn't they?
They did. They became friends. There's a couple of kind of funny stories, but perhaps for another day on that side. But they developed quite an unlikely relationship. But I suspect a lot of it was to do with being honourable, completely honest, and the sort of moral duties of decency, and the idea that, yes, you can redeem yourself, but only through effort. This sort of, well, I'm very sorry thing wouldn't mean a whole lot to someone like Norman Tebbit. But serving voluntary prison sentences, saving people's lives, putting your own life in immense risk, that appealed to him.
And that is what your father did. He was an IRA volunteer, a terrorist who helped kill Eva Martin, the first Greenfinch female Ulster Defence Regiment soldier who died in the Troubles. He also murdered an REC detective, Peter Flanagan. But until his dying day, as you say, he sought redemption for this. He knew this was wrong. Norman Tebbit knew Sean O'Callaghan was seeking redemption. And I wonder if you could talk us through a little bit about how your father sought that redemption, because he wrote a brilliant book called The Informer, which I was literally up to 3 o'clock in the morning reading. I was falling asleep and still reading it because it was so compelling. Just tell us a bit about your father and what he did to save lives, having taken them?
So I suppose the quick bit of background was he was what you would call a boy soldier at 15. In a sense, he was indoctrinated, came from a Republican family. His father, my grandfather, had been interned in the Curragh during the war by the Irish government and the Irish Republic for essentially wanting to support the Nazis. Horrific, I know. He went to jail very young, 16, his first jail sentence. He thought he was going off to fight imperialism and, strike a blow for international communism against the evils of British imperialism. And actually what it was about going and killing Protestant neighbours and Protestant farmers to gain back land that supposedly had been stolen 400 years previously. And very quickly, after committing two particularly terrible acts, he began to understand that he'd made a dreadful mistake, that he'd done something terribly wrong. And upon realising just how badly wrong he had done, he left the IRA initially, which was something that was quite easy to do, hard to imagine for most people, I imagine. Moved to England, had a relatively normal life for a while. But the whole time, the voice in the back of his head, which he talks about as being like his mother's voice in a sense, was telling him, you've got to pay for this, mate. You have done really, really bad things and there has to be a price to pay. So he took himself back to Ireland. He rejoined the IRA, which was relatively easy to do. But he contacted the Irish Special Branch and became an unpaid informer on behalf of the Irish Special Branch. And he then proceeded to do his utmost to do as much damage to the provisional IRA as he could, and he did quite a bit. That went on for a number of years. He intercepted some very serious arms shipments. You touched on it earlier. He saved the life of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, which, as we both know, saved an awful lot of Irish people's lives living in the UK. The consequences of the successful murder of the People's Princess to Irish-British relations would just be unimaginable. He managed that for a few years under extraordinary pressure, succeeded in huge amounts of sort of shipments and things like that. But the news grew tighter. He had some electoral success. He became quite a high electoral member of Sinn Féin on their councils. He was elected as a local council and things like that. However, it became too much. And it became clear it was getting too tight. He jumped ship, went to England, came and lived with me, actually, and my mother. This is another story. And then he came to the conclusion that the only thing he could do at that point was to hand himself into the police.
And he served a sentence, was then given the royal prerogative of mercy, and then developed a number of these extraordinary friendships with people like Norman Tebbit. What do you think your father would have thought of the death of Norman Tebbit this week?
I think my father would have believed that Norman Tebbit represented the best of a sterner type of England. Norman did the right thing by his wife for over 40 decades without saying a word about it. He was tough, he was strong, there was no sentimentality, but he was absolutely decent and honourable and strong. And we've lost honour, we've lost strength, we've lost decency, we've lost integrity, we've mistaken compassion and sort of weakness for strength. They're not. The fact that in latter years he spoke about his regrets around some of the stuff with the miners and everything else showed a man who could look back at things he had done and understand where he was right and where he was wrong. He was particularly clever. He represented the better part of the English working class. Something that's been lost since the Blairite years. We've despised and sort of thrown away the English working class, who are the backbone of the country, always have been. And it's no coincidence that a certain type of intellectual, sort of Islington type, loathed and despised the Norman Tebbits of the world. But they're the best part of Britain, and my father adored Britain and adored the English,
Yeah. Well, Rory, thanks for speaking to us today. Really interesting to speak to Rory Hanrahan, who is a pub landlord and indeed a writer for The Spectator. The article is headlined Norman Tebbit, Forgiveness and My Father, the IRA Bomber, and it's on the Spectator website. I highly recommend you give it a read. Lots of people getting in touch, including Nicola, who says, how about legal British citizens have their Northern... Sorry, let me start this again. Nicola in London says, how about legal British citizens have their national insurance number as before and illegals have ID cards? Leslie says, how can ID cards be issued to migrants who have thrown their documents overboard? And Steve in Sussex has been in touch, as well as Nick in Wiltshire, who says a biometric ID system done right can improve all our lives and doesn't require physically carrying a card. The times are changing technology and this is inevitable. Lots more reaction to all our stories in the last 10 minutes of the programme coming up very, very soon here on Talk.
Aides representing the royal households of the King and Prince Harry have been having a little chit-chat, possibly about how to heal the rift. Charlotte joins us now. What is going on?
Well, aides for Prince Harry, two of them, one of them Meredith Maines, who is Meghan and Harry's right-hand woman in Montecito, flew over, met with this other guy called Liam Maguire, who's their kind of UK sort of head of comms, and they went and had a very secret clandestine meeting in St James's with Tobin Andre.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mark in Dunstable, who says if these immigrants have family in this country, then the family members can pay for a legitimate flight to the UK, which is cheaper than paying to get here illegally. Sue says the only deterrent for migrants is indeterminate detention offshore, only the absolute necessities. Thank you as well to Stephen Bromsgrove, who says ID cards will do nothing to improve the illegal migrant issue. Red herring land. The blow will give them temporary ID and say they will be given access to money. Housing and public services, it's the will to face the problem down that is missing, not ID cards. Another person says, I would be very interested in knowing why you're against ID cards. I used to be, but society has changed. I think we basically have them already, and I don't really want to have a card to prove my identity. I'm a citizen, I pay my taxes. You can check my, national insurance number if you want to. I suppose I have a driving license, as a lot of people do. Not everybody, of course. Certainly if you're voting in an election, you should have to show some form of ID, but most people have already. Why have an extra ID card? Francis in Sussex says, I'm also against a digital ID too. I agree with you. I also just don't trust the authorities to hold our information safely. There's so many data breaches from them, officially and elsewhere. Let's talk about weight loss with Stephen in Kent. Stephen, I think we have you now. Hello.
Yeah, hi Peter.
Hi there. What would you like to say on weight loss?
Yeah, well, I was in July last year. I went to the doctor just before July last year, and my diabetes was completely out of control. My diabetes count was well up in the high 30s, and he told me that I was a few months away from going on insulin injections. I was taking metformin tablets for the diabetes for 18 years, and he gave me the option to take Mounjaro,
which is one of these weight loss drugs. Yeah,
it's one of the main ones in England. Anyway, he said to me, if you take this drug and do some exercise and change your eating habits, he said this will stop your appetite. And I took it, and since then, at that time I was 19 stone 8, and now I'm 12 stone.
Wow, that's a huge loss. Well done.
I'm a London taxi driver, so I sit on my backside full time. I walk every day now, where I never used to walk 10 metres. I now walk 6-7 miles every single day. It's just completely changed my life. I'm 67 years of age, he's told me that it's most probably going to help me live another 15 to 20 years.
Great stuff. Well, will you be able to keep the weight off? Are you still taking the jabs then?
No, I'm off it now. I've been off it for 2 months, and I'm lingering still around the 12 stone mark. I've put on a pound, and then I've lost a couple of pounds. I still weigh myself at least, well, maybe once a fortnight.
Yeah.
And I've not gone over like 12 stone 2.
Okay, well, it's clearly worked for you, Stephen, and it's reversed your strides towards diabetes. So well done, Stephen. That's clearly worked for you. Really interesting perspective there as well, Stephen. I just wonder, are you worried about the? Stephen's gone. Ian is in Bridgend and has given me a call about migration. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Pleasure to speak to you. First off, I think it was a little bit unfair to our senior service earlier this morning when he said they're only trained to kill. If you look at most of the promotional material...
they're trained to do many more things than killing. Many more things than that.
Yeah, indeed. The situation's obvious. It's a lack of political will, isn't it? You know, Trump has proven, Orban has proven, provided you have the political will. That's all you need, really. That's the silver bullet, you know. Maintain your borders. It's been zero illegal immigration into the southern border and into America. Recently.
You're right about political will there, Ian, and I'm not sure it exists in this country. What do you think?
It does, and I think reform will show the way when we get in Wales now with the Assembly elections next year. I would imagine the first thing that will be done is we do away with this nonsense nation of sanctuary states.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. It is something we don't need to do, and there are individual councils who want there to be councils of sanctuary and so on. I personally don't want that to happen. Liam's in Kent. Liam, what do you make of this story?
I just want to tell you about what actually happened. My late mum used to work for Kent County Council with unaccompanied asylum seeking children.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
What she's no longer with us, but what she told me is she was so frustrated with the powers that be, because what happens over in France, they are given leaflets from NGOs like Care for Calais, for example, saying as soon as you get here, say that you're 16, say that you're 15, 16. When they actually land, some of them that can't speak English, there is a chart thing. They can point to their age, they point to their flag, they point to their rank. Anyway, she was say, right, I'm 42, my brother's 49. So obviously she knew what an 18-year-old chap looks like.
Yeah, as most people do. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So she would say, come on, he's got a beard, he's got an Adam's apple, he's got chest hair running down to his navel. You know, what we need to do is we need to have bone scans for them and do teeth scans, dental records, etc. And do you know what? She was constantly banging her head against a brick wall because the powers that be said it's against their human rights.
Oh, for goodness sake, yeah, it's just such a load of old nonsense, isn't it? Well, listen, Liam, thanks for that perspective. I appreciate that, and I agree with every word you say there. Final call from Dan in Warrington. Dan, you're very welcome to the programme today. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking, with them throwing their documents into the sea, well, why can't we, people keep saying, oh, you can't take them back to France because it's against this rule and against that rule. Why can't we just say, well, okay, if you've got no documents and no way of proving who you are, we're just going to assume that you're French and take you back.
Yeah, well, they know the system, and they know that getting rid of those documents will mean that they're treated even better than they would have been already, Dan.
Yeah, but the other thing is, everybody's saying we can't take them back to France. We just can't do that because it's against certain regulations and this, that and the other. Well, let's just say the Royal Navy were on an exercise off the coast of America and suddenly came across a dinghy full of people that were struggling and picked them up. Where would they take them? Would they take them to America, or would they bring them several thousands of miles back to the UK?
Well, it's a very, very good point, Dan, and I think that there's a lot that can be done if the will is there.
The will is just not there. That's clearly why the Conservatives as well, when they come on and say and try and blame Labour, right? That's pie in the sky because they caused all this, and they had a majority in the House of Commons to change the laws to suit what we wanted to do. And they say, oh well, we made mistakes. It wasn't mistakes that they made. It was happening.
Yeah. And they probably knew there were
for the people.
Yeah, and they knew there were mistakes at the time. Dan, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks to everybody who rang in. Sorry we didn't get to everybody, and sorry we didn't get to read out all the messages that have come in. We've had loads of interaction today, more so even than usual, and thank you for that. Let me read out a couple of more messages before we go. Aubrey from Westminster says the illegal immigrants throw away their passports and IDs in the Channel and then present themselves as false identity upon landing in the UK. Now Starmer proposes to give them an ID card which validates that false identity. You couldn't make it up. That's a really good point. Steve says the ID scheme, they have no documentation in many cases, so could be hiding goodness knows what in their past. So will the government just be giving them a non-traceable brand new ID? Dave says this country is being dismantled. It began with Tony Blair, followed by the Conservatives, and now continued by Labour under Keir Starmer. The tipping point has been reached that we have a daily race and culture issues breaking this country apart. The next 4 years will see the job complete. If you're young, get out now. There are no prospects of having a decent life here now. Well,